Welcome, dear traveler through time, to the halls of medieval power, to stone castles and royal chambers, to throne rooms where queens sat in judgment, to private councils where women shaped the destinies of kingdoms, and to the complex world of medieval female royalty, where official powerlessness often masked extraordinary influence. Tonight, as you settle into rest, we will journey through the courts of medieval Europe, meeting the queens, empresses, and princesses who navigated the treacherous waters of dynastic politics, wielded power despite legal restrictions, and left indelible marks on history through intelligence, determination, and strategic brilliance. This is not the simplistic story of damsels in distress waiting for rescue, nor is it the modern fantasy of proto-feminists consciously fighting patriarchy. The reality was far more complex. Medieval royal women operated within severe constraints, yet found ways to exercise real power, acting as regents for minor sons, counseling husbands and brothers, commanding armies, managing vast estates, engaging in diplomacy, and occasionally ruling as queens regnant in their own right. We will meet Eleanor of Aquitaine, Duchess in her own right, Queen of France, then Queen of England, Mother of Kings, who lived into her 80s, surviving 2 royal marriages, crusades, rebellions, and imprisonment. We will encounter Empress Matilda, who fought a bitter civil war for the English throne, establishing precedents for female inheritance that would echo through centuries. We will stand with Blanche of Castile, Regent of France, who governed with such skill that even her enemies acknowledged her political genius. We will explore the institution of queenship itself, what powers queens officially held, what influence they exercised informally, how they navigated courts dominated by men, and how individual women of extraordinary ability transcended or manipulated restrictive norms. We will examine royal marriages as diplomatic instruments, childbirth as both duty and danger, and widowhood as paradoxically offering freedom that marriage often denied. But we approach this topic with balance. Medieval queens were neither uniformly oppressed victims nor modern feminists ahead of their time. They were women of their era, raised to understand their roles, accepting many medieval assumptions, yet within those parameters, some exercised remarkable agency, intelligence, and power. They were products of aristocratic culture, benefiting from noble privilege even as they faced gendered restrictions, capable of both great wisdom and cruelty, both compassion and ruthlessness. So breathe deeply, let your mind enter the candlelit chambers of medieval queens, and prepare to explore a world where women without formal authority nevertheless shaped history through marriages that forged alliances, through sons they raised to rule, through regencies where they governed as effectively as kings, and through sheer force of personality and intelligence that allowed them to bend medieval society's rigid structures just enough to exercise real power. Let us begin in 12th century Aquitaine, where a girl named Eleanor is born into one of medieval Europe's greatest duchies, destined to become the most powerful woman of her age. Eleanor of Aquitaine c. 1122–1204 was perhaps medieval Europe's most remarkable woman, beautiful, intelligent, politically astute, cultured, and extraordinarily long-lived for her era. Her life spanned 8 decades, 2 royal marriages, participation in the Second Crusade, motherhood of 10 children including 2 kings of England and 1 Duke of Aquitaine, imprisonment for rebellion, and active political involvement into her late 70s. Understanding Eleanor requires understanding both her exceptional circumstances and her era's constraints on even the most powerful women. Birth and inheritance c. 1122–1137. Eleanor was born around 1122, the exact date is uncertain, to William X, Duke of Aquitaine, and Einar de Châtellerault. Aquitaine was one of medieval Europe's richest territories, encompassing much of southwestern France from Poitiers to the Pyrenees. Wealthy from agriculture, wine production, and trade. Culturally sophisticated center of troubadour culture, courtly love poetry, and refined court life. Larger and richer than the royal domain of the French king. Eleanor's childhood was spent at courts in Poitiers and Bordeaux. She received an education unusual for women, literacy in French and Latin, knowledge of music, poetry, and courtly culture. She was exposed to troubadour poetry and the culture of courtly love that idealized noble women. She learned estate management and the practical skills noble women needed. In 1137, tragedy struck. Duke William X died while on pilgrimage, leaving no male heirs. Eleanor, approximately 15 years old, inherited Aquitaine, making her the most eligible heiress in Europe. By feudal law, Eleanor was duchess in her own right, but medieval custom required she have a male guardian. Her father had made her a ward of King Louis VI of France, expecting she would marry the king's son. Queen of France 1137–1152. Within months of her father's death, Eleanor married Louis VII, who became King of France shortly after his father died that same summer of 1137. The marriage made Eleanor Queen of France. She brought Aquitaine to the French crown. Technically, she retained ownership, but it was controlled by her husband. She was approximately 15, Louis about 17. The marriage represented a massive territorial gain for the French monarchy. But problems emerged quickly. Cultural differences. Eleanor was from the sophisticated, cultured court of Aquitaine, accustomed to troubadour poetry, music, luxury, and courtly refinement. Louis was pious, ascetic, raised for the church. He had been a second son, unexpectedly becoming heir when his older brother died. The personality mismatch. Contemporary sources suggest Eleanor found Louis too pious and conservative. One chronicler claimed she complained he was more monk than king. Political tensions. Eleanor accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade 1147–1149, one of few queens to go on crusade. The crusade was disastrous militarily and personally. French and German armies suffered defeats and heavy losses. Relations between Eleanor and Louis deteriorated. In Antioch, Eleanor stayed with her uncle Raymond, Prince of Antioch. Louis became suspicious, possibly jealously, and rumors of impropriety circulated, though evidence is lacking. The crusade ended in failure, and Louis and Eleanor returned to France with their marriage badly strained. Most critically, lack of male heirs. Eleanor bore 2 daughters, Marie, later Countess of Champagne, and Alex, but no sons. In medieval succession systems, this was seen as failure. The annulment 1152, after 15 years of marriage, Eleanor and Louis sought annulment on grounds of consanguinity. They were related within the 4th degree, which was technically prohibited but extremely common among nobility and usually ignored. The real reason was political: no male heir, and irreconcilable differences. The church granted the annulment. Crucially, Eleanor retained Aquitaine. She had inherited it in her own right, so it reverted to her rather than remaining with Louis. This was a massive blow to French royal power. Within 2 months, Eleanor made a shocking decision. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, 11 years her junior. Queen of England, 1152–1189. Eleanor's marriage to Henry was a love match initially, and a political alliance. Henry was young, energetic, ambitious, and brilliant. He held Normandy and Anjou through inheritance. He was fighting to claim England. His mother was Empress Matilda, who had a claim to the English throne. Eleanor's addition of Aquitaine made him master of more of France than the French king himself. In 1154, Henry conquered England and became King Henry II. Eleanor was now Queen of England for the second time, a queen, but now of a much more powerful kingdom. The early years 1150s–1160s were productive. Children. Eleanor and Henry had 8 children in rapid succession. William died young. Henry called the young king. Matilda married the Duke of Saxony. Richard, later Richard I, the Lionheart. Geoffrey, Duke of Brittany. Eleanor married the King of Castile. Joan married the King of Sicily. John, later King John. This prodigious childbearing, 10 children total from 2 marriages, was remarkable, and dangerous childbirth was the leading cause of death for medieval noblewomen. Political partnership. Eleanor and Henry worked together, managing their vast territories: the Angevin Empire, England, Normandy, Anjou, Aquitaine, and other territories. Eleanor governed Aquitaine, her ancestral territory, while Henry was elsewhere. She issued charters and judgments in her own right. She managed estates, administered justice, and conducted diplomacy. She served as regent in England when Henry was in France. But the marriage deteriorated. Henry's infidelities. He took numerous mistresses, most famously Rosamund Clifford, Fair Rosamund. Medieval kings often had mistresses, but Henry was apparently flagrant, humiliating Eleanor. Political tensions. As their sons grew, Henry's plans for dividing territories created conflicts. He wanted to give John his favorite substantial territories, but this required taking lands from his older brothers. The Great Rebellion 1173-1174, Eleanor and 3 of her sons Henry the young king, Richard and Geoffrey rebelled against Henry's stead. The causes: Henry the young king had been crowned company king, but given no real power, he resented being king in title only. Richard was promised Aquitaine, but Henry the II interfered with his governance. Eleanor supported her sons, possibly from personal resentment against Henry. The rebellion had support from Louis VII of France, Eleanor's ex-husband, ironically. The rebellion failed. Henry II crushed the revolt. The sons were forgiven, they were his heirs, but Eleanor was captured trying to escape to France, reportedly dressed in men's clothing. Imprisonment 1173-1189. Henry II imprisoned Eleanor for 16 years, not a dungeon. She was held in comfortable confinement, various castles, Winchester, Salisbury, and others, with servants and appropriate quarters, but she was a prisoner nonetheless, unable to leave or exercise independent authority. The imprisonment demonstrated Henry's view that Eleanor was too dangerous to remain free. She was intelligent, politically skilled, commanded loyalty in Aquitaine, and had proven willing to rebel. During these years, she was occasionally brought to court for Christmas or Easter celebrations. Medieval kings held formal court at major religious festivals, but otherwise remained confined. The political significance: by imprisoning his wife, Henry prevented her from causing further trouble, secured her lands Aquitaine, and removed a potential focus for opposition. Widowhood and power 1189-1204. Henry II died in 1189, and Eleanor's eldest surviving son became King Richard I. At approximately 67 years old, Eleanor was finally free. Richard immediately released her, and she became one of his most important political advisors. During Richard's reign 1189-1199, Eleanor was extraordinarily active regent when Richard went on the Third Crusade 1189-1192. Eleanor helped govern England along with other officials. Diplomat. When Richard was captured returning from crusade and held for ransom by the Holy Roman Emperor, Eleanor organized the collection of the enormous ransom, 150,000 marks, 2 years' revenue of England. Traveled to Germany personally in her 70s to negotiate his release, ensured the money was delivered, and Richard freed 1194. Family manager. She arranged marriages for her grandchildren, mediated between Richard and John, who had intrigued during Richard's absence, and worked to secure the succession. When Richard died childless in 1199, Eleanor supported John's accession over Arthur of Brittany, son of Geoffrey, who had a credible claim. This was controversial. Arthur was closer in succession by primogeniture, but Eleanor's support was crucial to John's success. During John's reign, 1199-1216, Eleanor remained active into her late 70s. In 1200, at age 78, she traveled to Spain to fetch her granddaughter Blanche of Castile, daughter of Eleanor's daughter Eleanor, to marry Louis, heir to the French, thrown a journey across the Pyrenees in winter, demonstrating remarkable stamina. In 1202, when Arthur of Brittany besieged Mirebeau Castle where Eleanor was staying, she held out until John's forces relieved her at age 80. She was still involved in military conflicts. Death 1204. Eleanor died at Fontevraud Abbey at approximately 82 years old, an extraordinary age for medieval times. She was buried at Fontevraud alongside Henry II, ironically, and later her son Richard. Eleanor's legacy. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life reveals both medieval queens' potential power and their constraints. Power. She ruled Aquitaine in her own right, governed England as regent, influenced two kingdoms' policies, raised and advised multiple kings, and remained politically active into her 80s. Constraints. She could be imprisoned by her husband without trial, her sons inherited while daughters, though noble in their own right through marriages, didn't, and her authority ultimately derived from her relationships with men: father, husbands, sons. Cultural influence. Eleanor patronized poets and artists, promoted courtly culture, and influenced the development of courtly love literature. Her court at Poitiers became legendary, though many stories are exaggerated or invented by later writers. Historical assessment. Medieval chroniclers' views varied. Some praised her wisdom and beauty, others condemned her for rebellion and questioned her morals. Modern historians recognize her as one of the most capable political figures of her age, male or female. To understand medieval queens, we must examine the institution itself. What was a queen? What powers did she hold? What roles did she play? How did individual women navigate and sometimes transcend the limitations of their position? Types of queens. Medieval queenship took several forms. Queen consort, a queen by marriage to a king, the most common form. Her status derived from her husband. She retained the title even if widowed, though her power usually diminished. Her position was influential but technically subordinate. Queen Regnant, a queen ruling in her own right, much rarer and more controversial, required some legal justification, inheritance in absence of male heirs, specific succession rules, etc. Often faced challenges to legitimacy. Examples include Eleanor of Lyon and Castile, Melisende of Jerusalem. Queen Regent, a queen governing on behalf of another, usually a minor son, a recognized role with legal standing. Temporary but often involving substantial power. Examples include Blanche of Castile for Louis IX, Isabella of France for Edward III. Queen Dowager, a widowed queen, especially one who had been queen consort, could be influential, especially as mother of the current king, could be marginalized, especially if the new king's wife or mother had different interests. Status varied widely depending on circumstances. The official powers of queen consorts. Queen's consort had specific recognized roles. Coronation and anointing. Queens were crowned and anointed with holy oil in religious ceremonies. This gave them quasi-sacred status. They were God's anointed, though subordinate to the king. The ceremony established their legitimacy. The queen's household. Queens maintained their own households, separate finances from dower lands and other income. Staff ladies in waiting, chaplains, administrators, servants, courts where they held audiences and conducted business. Intercession. The queen's formal role as intercessor. She was expected to plead with the king for mercy for petitioners. This was a recognized political function. People sought the queen's intercession to soften the king's justice. It demonstrated the queen's compassion and the king's mercy when he granted her requests. Patronage. Queens were patrons of religious foundations, monasteries, convents, churches, artists, poets, and scholars, charitable institutions. This patronage gave them influence and built networks of loyalty. Diplomatic marriages. Queen's daughters and female relatives were married to foreign princes. The queen often negotiated these marriages. She maintained correspondence with her daughters after marriage. This created networks of diplomatic connections. Childbearing. The queen's most critical role, producing heirs, especially sons, to secure the succession. This was both a duty and a source of power. The mother of the heir had leverage. Failure to produce heirs, especially sons, could lead to political vulnerability or even annulment. The informal powers. Beyond official roles, queens exercised informal influence. Counsel. The queen was the king's closest companion and confidante. She had regular private access to him. She could advise him on policy. Her opinions could influence his decisions. Smart kings listened to intelligent queens. Foolish kings ignored valuable advice at their peril. Networks. Queens built networks of supporters through patronage. People owed them favors. Through family connections. Through personal relationships. These networks could be mobilized for political purposes. Regency. When kings were absent, war, crusades, administrative journeys, queens often governed. This was practical. The queen was trustworthy, legitimate, and familiar with policy. It demonstrated that women could govern effectively. It provided precedents for female rule. Landholding. Queens held lands, dower, inheritance, gifts. These lands provided income. They gave queens economic independence. They could be used as patronage. The constraints. Despite these powers, queens faced significant limitations. Legal subordinacy by feudal and canon law. Wives were subordinate to husbands. A queen could not act against the king's will legally. The king could confiscate her lands. He could imprison her, as Henry II imprisoned Eleanor. Succession. Queens typically couldn't inherit thrones or pass them to daughters, though exceptions existed. Sons inherited before daughters. Brothers inherited before sisters. This meant even powerful queens saw their sons rule while they advised from the shadows. Gender expectations. Medieval society assumed women were physically weaker and requiring male protection. Emotionally unstable. Medieval medicine claimed women's physiology made them more emotional, intellectually inferior, though education could overcome this. Properly subordinate to male authority. Religious justifications. The church taught women's subordination stemmed from Eve's role in the fall. Women should be silent in matters of governance, though this was often ignored in practice. Women's primary roles were wife and mother. Political vulnerability. Queens could be divorced or annulled if they didn't produce heirs. Accused of adultery or treason with devastating consequences. Marginalized if the king took mistresses or preferred other advisors. The strategies for power. Successful queens developed strategies for exercising power within these constraints. Competence, demonstrating ability in governance, diplomacy, and administration. When queens governed as regents, and did so effectively, they proved women's capabilities. Success created precedence and respect. Piety, public religious devotion, founded monasteries and churches. Supported religious orders. Cultivated relationships with the clergy. This gave them moral authority and divine sanction. Maternity, emphasizing their role as mothers. Mothers of heirs had power through their sons. The queen mother was respected and influential. Raising sons to be loyal to her ensured future influence. Cultural patronage, supporting poets, artists, and scholars, created positive reputations. Built loyal networks. Enhanced their court's prestige. Strategic marriage alliances, marrying daughters advantageously, created diplomatic ties. Gave queens influence through daughters in foreign courts. Built international networks. Personal relationships, cultivating loyalty from nobles, clergy, and administrators. Personal charisma mattered. Generosity and fair dealing created loyal supporters. These relationships could be mobilized in crises. Widowhood as opportunity. Paradoxically, widowhood sometimes increased power. As dowagers, they escaped husbands' control. As queen mothers, they influenced sons. They controlled dower lands independently. They could sometimes remarry, choosing their own husbands, or remain independent. Empress Matilda, 1102–1167, daughter of Henry I of England, fought one of medieval England's most bitter civil wars for the throne, a conflict known as the Anarchy 1135–1153. Her struggle established important precedents for female inheritance and demonstrated both the possibilities and limitations of queenly power in an age that preferred male rulers. Birth and royal childhood. 1102–1114. Matilda was born in 1102, the daughter of King Henry I of England and Matilda of Scotland. Her position was initially not unusual, a king's daughter, expected to make an advantageous marriage. She had a younger brother, William Adelin, who was heir to the throne. In 1110, at age 8, Matilda was betrothed to Henry V, Holy Roman Emperor, the German king. This was a prestigious match. The Holy Roman Empire was Europe's most prestigious title. She traveled to Germany, where she was educated at the imperial court. She learned German in addition to Norman French and Latin. She received formal education in statecraft and court protocol. She was groomed to be empress. In 1114, at age 12, she married Emperor Henry V, who was in his 30s. She became Holy Roman Empress, the highest title available to a woman in Christian Europe. Empress and widow. 1114–1128. As Empress, Matilda held court at the imperial palace, participated in governance, witnessed imperial charters, traveled with Henry across the empire, gained experience in rulership and administration. The marriage appears to have been reasonably successful politically, though it produced no children. Whether this was due to infertility, limited cohabitation due to Henry's military campaigns, or other factors is unknown. In 1125, Emperor Henry V died. Matilda, now 23, was a childless widow. As a woman, she couldn't succeed to the imperial title, which was elective anyway, technically chosen by German princes, though usually following hereditary lines. The White Ship disaster. 1120. While Matilda was in Germany, a catastrophe struck her father's family. William Adelin, Henry I's only legitimate son and heir, drowned when the White Ship sank crossing from Normandy to England in 1120. Also drowned were many young English and Norman nobles. This disaster threw the succession into crisis. Henry I was a widower. His wife had died, and while he later remarried, He had no further legitimate sons, though he acknowledged over 20 illegitimate children, more than any other English king. Henry's options for succession were limited: his daughter Matilda in Germany, his nephew Stephen of Blois, son of his sister Adela, possibly one of his nephews in Normandy, the designated heir 1126-1135. Henry I decided that Matilda would inherit in 1126. He summoned Matilda back from Germany. She returned reluctantly. She had been Empress, one of the highest positions in Christendom, and returning to be merely a king's daughter was a demotion. In 1127, Henry I made his barons swear an oath to recognize Matilda as his heir. This was controversial. Women didn't typically inherit kingdoms, and some barons were uncomfortable with the oath. But all swore, including Stephen of Blois, who would later break this oath. Henry arranged a second marriage for Matilda. In 1128, Matilda, aged 26, married Geoffrey of Anjou, age 15, the heir to the county of Anjou, a powerful territory in France. The marriage was strategically important, securing Anjou as an ally, but personally difficult. Matilda resented marrying someone 11 years younger and of lower rank. She had been Empress. He was merely a count's son. Geoffrey was reportedly handsome and charismatic but immature. Matilda was strong-willed, and imperious contemporaries called her arrogant. Their relationship was stormy. Nevertheless, the marriage produced 3 sons: Henry, later Henry II of England, Geoffrey, William. Having sons strengthened Matilda's position. She now had male heirs, which medieval minds found more acceptable than direct female succession. The succession crisis, 1135. In December 1135, Henry I died in Normandy. Matilda was in Anjou. Stephen of Blois was closer in Boulogne. Stephen acted quickly. He crossed to England immediately. He claimed the throne, arguing that Henry I had allegedly changed his mind on his deathbed, unverifiable. Matilda's marriage to Geoffrey was unpopular. Anjou and Normandy were traditional rivals. England needed a male ruler. He was closer by blood to Henry I's Saxon mother, appealing to English sentiment. He secured the support of his brother, Henry of Blois, Bishop of Winchester and papal legate. The church crowned him Christmas 1135. Most barons accepted him as king. Matilda was outraged. The barons had sworn oaths to her. Stephen had usurped her rightful inheritance. But her position was weak. She was in Anjou, far from England. She was female, and medieval society preferred male rulers. Her husband Geoffrey was unpopular in Normandy. Stephen had possession 9/10 of the law. The anarchy begins 1139-1148. For several years, Matilda consolidated support. In 1139, she invaded England with the support of her half-brother Robert, Earl of Gloucester, an illegitimate son of Henry I, intelligent and loyal to Matilda. Some barons who preferred her, or who had grievances against Stephen. The King of Scotland, her uncle by marriage. The conflict was bitter and destructive. February 1141, at the Battle of Lincoln, Matilda's forces captured Stephen. Matilda appeared to have won. Matilda was declared Lady of the English, not quite Queen. The title was ambiguous, reflecting discomfort with female rule. But Matilda made critical errors: arrogance. She reportedly treated the Londoners and nobles high-handedly. Contemporary chronicles, admittedly often hostile to her, describe her as arrogant and domineering. Refusing to compromise, she wouldn't negotiate with Stephen's wife, also named Matilda, called Matilda of Boulogne, or make concessions to win broader support. The Londoners rioted and drove her out of the city before she could be crowned at Westminster Abbey. September 1141. Matilda's forces were defeated at the rout of Winchester. Her half-brother Robert was captured. Matilda exchanged Stephen for Robert, a strategic error, as Stephen immediately resumed the war, while Robert, though valuable, was subordinate. The stalemate 1142-1148, neither side could decisively defeat the other. Matilda controlled western England and parts of the Midlands. Stephen controlled the southeast, including London. Border regions changed hands repeatedly. The country suffered from warfare. The anarchy became proverbial for lawlessness and suffering. The Oxford escape 1142, a famous incident, demonstrated Matilda's courage. Matilda was besieged in Oxford Castle by Stephen's forces during winter. The siege dragged on, and food ran low. One night, Matilda and a few companions escaped. They were lowered by ropes from the castle walls. They crossed the frozen Thames River. It was midwinter. They walked through the snow wearing white as camouflage. They reached safety in Wallingford. This daring escape became legendary, showing Matilda's determination and physical courage. The Resolution 1148-1153. By the late 1140s, Matilda recognized she couldn't win outright in 1148. She left England and returned to Normandy. She never returned to England, though the war continued. The focus shifted to Matilda's son, Henry Fitz-Empress, later Henry II. Henry, born 1133, was knighted in 1149 at age 16, and began participating in the war. He had better prospects. He was male, eliminating the main objection to Matilda. He was clearly her heir. He had his own lands, Anjou, Normandy eventually. By the early 1150s, exhaustion set in. Neither side could win. The barons wanted peace. Stephen's own son Eustace died suddenly in 1153. Stephen was aging and war-weary. The Treaty of Winchester 1153, Stephen and Henry negotiated peace. Stephen would remain king for his lifetime. Henry would be adopted as Stephen's heir. Upon Stephen's death, Henry would inherit peacefully. Current landholders would retain their estates. Stephen died in 1154. Henry became King. Henry II at age 21. Matilda's son was king. She had not ruled herself, but secured the succession for her line. Later life 1154-1167. Matilda lived until 1167, spending her final years in Normandy. She never ruled England directly except briefly in 1141, but she had secured the succession for her son. Established precedent that daughters could inherit, though with difficulty. Demonstrated women's capability in warfare and politics. Remained an advisor to Henry II. Her epitaph, which she possibly composed herself, read, "Here lies Henry's daughter, wife, and mother," identifying herself through relationships with three Henrys: her father Henry I, her husband Emperor Henry V, and her son Henry II. Matilda's legacy. Empress Matilda's struggle had several lasting impacts. Precedent for female inheritance. While she didn't ultimately rule, her fight established that daughters could inherit kingdoms, setting precedents for later female succession. Demonstration of capability. She led armies, made strategic decisions, governed territories, and proved women could exercise power even if medieval society remained uncomfortable with it. The cost of civil war. The anarchy demonstrated the devastation of contested succession, encouraging later rulers to ensure clear succession planning. Her son's success, Henry II, became one of England's greatest kings, ruling the Angevin Empire. Matilda's struggles made his reign possible. Modern assessments. Medieval chroniclers were often hostile. Discomfort with female power, partisan loyalties. Modern historians recognize her capability and the extraordinary challenges she faced as a woman claiming a throne in an era unprepared for female rule. Blanche of Castile 1188-1252, Queen of France and twice regent for her son Louis IX. Louis was one of medieval Europe's most capable rulers. She governed France during two crucial periods, crushed rebellions, negotiated treaties, and raised a son who became one of history's most revered kings. Blanche demonstrated that female regents, when given authority and support, could govern as effectively as kings, sometimes more so. Birth and royal marriage 1188-1200. Blanche was born in 1188 in Palencia, Castile, Spain, daughter of Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England. Her maternal grandmother was Eleanor of Aquitaine, who personally selected Blanche for the marriage alliance with France. In 1200, at age 12, Blanche traveled to France to marry Louis, heir to the French throne, later Louis White. The marriage was arranged by Eleanor of Aquitaine, then about 78 years old. It sealed peace between France and England. Blanche's mother was English princess. Blanche brought a dowry including territorial claims. The marriage was successful. Louis and Blanche had 12 children, though several died in infancy, typical for the era. They worked as partners in governance. Contemporary sources suggest genuine affection. Louis became king in 1223 as Louis VIII. Blanche became Queen of France. Brief reign and early widowhood 1223-1226. Louis VIII reign lasted only 3 years. He launched military campaigns against the Cathar heretics in southern France. The Albigensian Crusade was ongoing. expanding royal authority over southern territories. In 1226, Louis died suddenly, probably dysentery during a campaign. He was 39. His heir, Louis IX, was only 12 years old. Medieval custom and practical necessity meant a regency was required. Louis VIII designated Blanche as regent. This was unusual. Regencies often went to male relatives, uncles, brothers, but Louis VIII trusted Blanche's ability and knew her strength. First Regency 1226-1234, Blanche became regent for her minor son, and immediately faced crisis. The Barons' Rebellion. Many French barons refused to accept a foreign woman's authority. They formed a coalition against the crown. They were led by powerful nobles: Count of Champagne, Count of Brittany, Duke of Burgundy, others. They claimed to be defending the realm against foreign influence and female rule. Blanche's response was decisive military action. She raised royal forces and marched against rebels. She personally led armies on campaign. She besieged rebel castles. She demonstrated she wouldn't be intimidated. Diplomacy. She divided the rebel coalition, offered generous terms to those who submitted, used marriages to bind former rebels to the crown, exploited divisions among rebels. Protecting her son, she kept Louis IX close, protected from kidnapping attempts. Rebels tried to seize the young king to control the regency. Blanche foiled several plots. She was vigilant about his safety. Appeal to legitimacy. She emphasized Louis IX's divine right as anointed king. Her authority derived from the late king's will. Rebellion was treasonous and sinful. By the early 1230s, Blanche had crushed the rebellion. The barons submitted, and royal authority was restored. Governance and consolidation 1226-1234. Beyond military actions, Blanche governed effectively. Administrative reforms strengthened royal administration, appointed capable officials, improved tax collection, enhanced royal courts' authority over noble courts. Diplomacy, negotiated with foreign powers, maintained peace with England through her family connections, managed relations with the papacy. Economic management stabilized royal finances, encouraged trade, supported urban growth. Religious policy supported the church, building churches, endowing monasteries, continued the Albigensian crusade against Cathars, promoted religious orthodoxy. Raising the king. Most importantly, she raised Louis IX. She ensured he received excellent education. She instilled deep piety. He became known for sanctity. She taught him statecraft and governance. She prepared him for independent rule. In 1234, Louis IX was declared of age and began ruling independently. Blanche's first regency ended. The mother's influence 1234-1248. Even after Louis began ruling, Blanche remained enormously influential. She served as advisor. Louis consulted her on major decisions. She attended councils. She handled some administrative matters. Contemporary sources noted Louis's deep respect for his mother. He honored her and sought her advice. She maintained an apartment adjacent to his. Some courtiers complained she interfered too much in his marriage to Margaret of Provence. Blanche reportedly inspected Louis and Margaret's bedroom to ensure proper behavior. This may be exaggerated by hostile sources, but it illustrates perceptions of her controlling influence. Second Regency 1248-1252. In 1248, Louis IX departed on crusade. The Seventh Crusade. Blanche was again appointed regent, now in her 60s. She governed France for a second time. This regency faced different challenges. Shepherd's Crusade 1251, a popular movement of peasants claiming to go on crusade, devolved into violence. They attacked clergy and Jews. They threatened civil order. Blanche responded decisively. Royal forces dispersed the movement. Leaders were executed. Managing Louis's absence, she collected funds for the crusade, maintained order in France, corresponded with Louis in the Holy Land, prepared to ransom him if necessary. He was indeed captured and ransomed. Financial management. Crusades were expensive. She raised funds through taxation. She managed royal estates. She maintained solvency despite massive expenses. Diplomacy. She maintained foreign relations, negotiated treaties, and managed conflicts with neighboring territories. Death 1252. Blanche died in 1252, while Louis was still on crusade. She was approximately 64 years old, a good age for medieval times. She had governed France effectively for approximately 8 years, total 1226, 1234 and 1248, 1252, demonstrating exceptional administrative, military and diplomatic skills. Louis IX, upon receiving news of her death, reportedly grieved deeply and rushed back to France. The crusade was already failing, and his mother's death gave him additional impetus to return. Blanche's legacy. Blanche of Castile's accomplishments were extraordinary effective governance. She ruled France through 2 difficult periods, maintaining stability and royal authority. Military success. She led armies, crushed rebellions, and demonstrated that women could command troops effectively. Raising a Saint Louis IX became Saint Louis, one of the few canonized kings, renowned for piety, justice, and good governance. His character was partly formed by Blanche's education. Precedent for regency, she demonstrated that female regents could govern successfully, providing a model for later regents. Contemporary recognition, even critics acknowledged her ability. The chronicler Matthew Paris, often hostile to French power, called her a vigorous woman. Historical memory. Unlike some medieval queens whose reputations suffered from hostile sources, Blanche was generally well regarded. Her success was too obvious to deny. Here we pause in our exploration of medieval queens. We have walked with Eleanor of Aquitaine through 8 decades of extraordinary life, 2 queens' crowns, crusades, rebellion, imprisonment, and political influence into her 80s. We have stood with Empress Matilda as she fought for her rightful throne, escaping through snow-covered nights and establishing precedents for female inheritance. And we have witnessed Blanche of Castile govern France with such skill that even those who resented female rule had to acknowledge her competence. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the Queen's chamber in a medieval castle, candlelight flickering on tapestries, the Queen surrounded by counselors and clerks, making decisions that will affect kingdoms, drafting letters to allies and children scattered across Europe, raising sons who will be kings, and exercising power in a world that officially denied women authority, yet pragmatically recognized that capability and intelligence transcended gender. These 3 women, Eleanor, Matilda, and Blanche, demonstrate medieval queenship at its most powerful. But they were exceptional. When we continue, we will explore other remarkable queens: Melisende of Jerusalem, who ruled the Crusader kingdom; Isabella of France, the she-wolf, who deposed a king; Margaret of Anjou, who led armies in the Wars of the Roses; and Isabella of Castile, who unified Spain and sponsored Columbus. We will also examine the darker sides of queenship, the queens accused of adultery and treason, the powerless consorts, and those crushed by the system. But for now, rest. The stone walls of medieval castles stand silent. The queen's crowns rest in treasuries, and the memory of women who shaped history from thrones and regencies echoes through the centuries. Melisende of Jerusalem c. 1105–1161 stands apart from most medieval queens. She was a queen regnant, ruling the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem in her own right, not merely as consort or regent. Her reign demonstrated that women could rule independently and effectively, even in the militarized environment of the Crusader states, surrounded by hostile Islamic powers. Her story is also one of conflict with her husband and son, who challenged her authority, revealing the persistent tension between capable female rulers and medieval expectations of male dominance. The Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. To understand Melisende, we must understand her unique context. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was established in 1099, when the First Crusade captured the Holy City. It was a Christian state in the heart of the Islamic world. It survived through military prowess, diplomatic alliances, and divisions among Muslim powers. It was always precarious, surrounded by enemies, dependent on reinforcements from Europe. It attracted adventurers, pilgrims, and younger sons seeking land and glory. The Crusader states Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli, Edessa developed a unique culture. Frankish Western European nobility ruling over mixed populations, native Christians, Muslims, Jews. Constant warfare interspersed with periods of peace and coexistence. Cultural synthesis, adopting some Eastern customs while maintaining Western identity. Desperate need for capable leadership and political stability. This context made female rule more acceptable than in Europe. The Crusader states needed effective rulers regardless of gender, and ideology mattered less than survival. Birth and royal childhood c. 1105-1131. Melisende was born around 1105, daughter of Baldwin II, Count of Edessa, later King of Jerusalem, and Morphia of Melitene, an Armenian princess. Her name, Melisende, reflected her Armenian heritage. It was the Frankish form of the Armenian name Emily. Her mother Morphia was Armenian Orthodox. From a local Christian dynasty, this marriage represented the Crusaders' strategy of allying with local Christian populations. Melisende grew up understanding both Frankish and Eastern Christian cultures. She was multilingual: French, some Arabic, possibly Armenian, and Greek. Baldwin II became king of Jerusalem in 1118, making young Melisende a princess. She had 3 sisters but no brothers. This meant succession would pass through the female line, unusual for medieval monarchies. Her education prepared her for governance. She learned Latin, enabling her to read religious and administrative texts. She studied statecraft and diplomacy. She participated in court life, observing governance. She was trained in the religious duties expected of Christian rulers in the Holy Land. The succession plan 1128-1131. By the 1120s, Baldwin II needed to secure the succession. He chose Fulk of Anjou, a powerful French count, widowed father of Geoffrey, who later married Empress Matilda. As Melisende's husband, Fulk was about 40, Melisende approximately 23. Fulk brought military experience, European connections, and prestige. He was expected to defend Jerusalem militarily, but Baldwin II insisted on terms unusual for a consort marriage. The marriage contract 1129 specified Melisende would be queen in her own right, not merely queen consort. She would rule jointly with Fulk. Their children would inherit through both parents. This arrangement recognized that Melisende was the hereditary heir as Baldwin II's eldest child. Fulk's legitimacy derived from marriage to her, not independent claim. Jerusalem needed both Melisende's legitimacy and Fulk's military skills. Baldwin II died in 1131. Melisende and Fulk were crowned together as joint rulers, 2 monarchs of equal authority. Conflict with Fulk 1131-1143. Almost immediately, tensions emerged. Fulk attempted to sideline Melisende. He made decisions without consulting her. He excluded her from councils. He issued charters in his name alone. He tried to establish himself as sole ruler, reducing Melisende to decorative consort. Melisende resisted. She demanded her rights as company ruler. She insisted on participating in governance. She issued her own charters. She maintained her own court and officials. The conflict escalated into a political crisis. 1134, Hugh II of Jaffa, a powerful nobleman, was allied with Melisende. Fulk accused Hugh of having an affair with Melisende. The accusation was probably false, a political attack, rather than genuine adultery charge. Hugh challenged the accusers to trial by combat. Before the trial, Hugh was attacked and wounded, possibly on Fulk's orders. Hugh fled to Ascalon, a Muslim-held city, seeking protection. This scandal turned public opinion against Fulk. The nobility resented Fulk's attempts to monopolize power. The attack on Hugh seemed dishonorable. Many supported Melisende's rights as hereditary queen. Fulk backed down. He recalled Hugh and offered reconciliation. He acknowledged Melisende as company ruler, in fact, not just title. Government charters began listing both names equally. They governed jointly for the remainder of Fulk's life. The compromise established that Melisende had real authority. She participated in councils, issued orders, made judicial decisions, and conducted diplomacy alongside Fulk. Jousin rule and widowhood 1134-1143. For the next decade, Melisende and Fulk ruled together. Military campaigns. Fulk led military operations while Melisende governed the kingdom. This division of labor was practical. Fulk was an experienced warrior. Melisende managed internal administration, diplomacy, and governance. Both participated in major policy decisions. Their children, Baldwin born 1130, later Baldwin III. Amalric born 1136, later Amalric I. In 1143, Fulk died in a hunting accident thrown from his horse. He was approximately 53. Melisende became sole ruler as regent for her son Baldwin III, who was 13. Unlike typical regencies, where the regent governed temporarily until the heir reached maturity, Melisende continued as Queen Regnant. He was Baldwin's mother but also queen in her own right through hereditary claim. Solo rule 1143–1152. The next decade saw Melisende at the height of her power. She governed the Kingdom of Jerusalem independently administration. She appointed officials, issued charters, held courts, collected revenues, and managed the royal domain. Diplomacy: she negotiated with neighboring Muslim states. The Crusader states balanced warfare with diplomatic engagement. Treaties, truces, and alliances with Muslim powers were common. Melisende proved an able negotiator. Military affairs: while she didn't personally lead armies, women didn't typically do so, even ruling queens. She appointed military commanders, organized defenses, planned campaigns, made strategic decisions. Religious patronage: she founded churches and monasteries, the Church of St. Anne in Jerusalem still standing. She supported the military orders Templars, Hospitallers. She maintained close relations with the Patriarch of Jerusalem. Religious authority reinforced her political legitimacy. Cultural patronage: her court became a center of learning and art. She commissioned illuminated manuscripts, the Melisende Psalter, a masterpiece of Crusader art. She supported scholars and artists. Her court synthesized Western and Eastern influences. The Second Crusade 1147–1148. When European armies arrived for the Second Crusade, Melisende welcomed King Louis VII of France. Her cousin, his first wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, had been raised partly at Melisende's court. Participated in the Council of Acre, planning military strategy. Managed logistics and supplies for the Crusader armies. The crusade failed militarily. The attempt to capture Damascus was abandoned, but Melisende maintained her kingdom's stability despite the chaos of massive foreign armies passing through. Conflict with Baldwin III 1150–1152. As Baldwin III grew older, he demanded independent authority. By 1150, Baldwin was 20 and wanted to rule in his own right. But Melisende refused to step aside. She argued she was queen by hereditary right, not merely regent. She had governed successfully for years. She saw no reason to surrender power. Baldwin insisted that he was adult and the rightful king. Father-son succession disputes were common. Mother-son conflicts were rarer but equally bitter. The conflict split the kingdom. Some nobles supported Melisende, especially older nobles who had served with her for years. Others supported Baldwin, especially younger nobles, and those seeking favor with the new generation. The patriarch and military orders were divided. In 1152, the conflict became civil war. Baldwin's forces besieged Melisende in Jerusalem. She held the Tower of David, the citadel. Her supporters controlled parts of the city. The siege lasted several weeks. Eventually, the church mediated. Melisende and Baldwin agreed to divide the kingdom. Melisende would rule Jerusalem and surrounding territories. Baldwin would rule the northern regions, including the militarily important areas near Muslim borders. This compromise lasted only briefly. Within a few years, Melisende gradually surrendered territories to Baldwin, possibly due to political pressure. Possibly recognizing that divided rule weakened the kingdom. Possibly due to aging, she was in her late 40s and preferring retirement. By 1153, Baldwin III ruled the whole kingdom, though Melisende retained status and influence. Elder stateswoman, 1153–1161. For her final years, Melisende remained influential. She continued religious patronage and cultural activities. She advised Baldwin III on governance. Despite their conflict, he valued her experience. When Baldwin III married Theodora Komnena, a Byzantine princess, in 1158, Melisende helped facilitate the alliance with the Byzantine Empire. She maintained a court and household befitting a queen dowager. Death 1161. Melisende died in 1161, probably in her mid-50s, and was buried at the tomb of the Virgin Mary in Jerusalem. Her epitaph described her as queen and defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Melisende's legacy. Melisende of Jerusalem's reign demonstrated several important points. Women could rule independently. She governed effectively as Queen Regnant. not merely regent or consort, proving female capability in governance, diplomacy, and military leadership through appointment of commanders. Hereditary right mattered, her legitimacy derived from inheritance, not marriage. She was queen because she was Baldwin II heir, and this hereditary claim gave her authority even against her husband and son. Context shaped opportunities. The Crusader states, desperate for effective leadership and having fewer deeply entrenched traditions than European kingdoms, were more open to female rule. Gender remained a challenge. Both Fulk and Baldwin III attempted to sideline her, showing that even successful female rulers faced resistance and had to fight to maintain authority. Competence was recognized. Even those who resented female rule acknowledged Melisende's ability. Contemporary chronicles praised her wisdom, justice, and piety. Cultural influence, her patronage produced lasting artistic and architectural achievements, and her court influenced Crusader culture. Precedent. Her successful reign made female rule more conceivable, though Jerusalem's unique circumstances meant the precedent had limited impact in Europe. Isabella of France c. 1295–1358, Queen of England, earned the epithet She-Wolf of France for her role in deposing her husband, King Edward II. Her story is one of medieval queenship at its most dramatic. A wronged wife, who became a rebel leader, overthrew a king, and ruled as regent, before eventually being overthrown herself. Isabella's life reveals how queens, when pushed too far and willing to take extraordinary risks, could destroy kings, but also how even successful female rulers could be vilified by chroniclers and historians. Birth and royal marriage c. 1295–1308. Isabella was born around 1295, daughter of Philip Sore of France, Philip the Fair, and Joan I of Navarre. Her father was one of medieval Europe's most powerful kings. He expanded royal authority in France. He destroyed the Knights Templar. He humiliated the papacy. The Avignon captivity. He was formidable, ruthless, and effective. Isabella inherited her father's intelligence and determination, along with renowned beauty. Contemporary sources universally praised her appearance. In 1308, at about age 12, Isabella married Edward Agoncillo of England. The marriage was a diplomatic alliance between France and England. It sealed peace after years of conflict. Isabella brought a substantial dowry. She was crowned Queen of England. Edward II 1284–1327 was approximately 24, but the marriage was troubled from the start. Edward's favorite, Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight, was Edward's closest companion. Gaston was probably Edward's lover. Medieval sources hint at this, though they're careful about explicit accusations. Edward lavished attention, gifts, and honors on Gaveston. He neglected Isabella in favor of Gaveston. At the wedding celebrations, Edward reportedly spent more time with Gaveston than with his bride, sitting beside Gaveston at the feast, wearing jewelry Gaveston had given him, ignoring Isabella. This public humiliation set the tone for their marriage. The early years 1308–1321. Isabella's early years as queen were difficult. Gaveston's dominance, Edward's favoritism toward Gaveston, alienated the English nobility. Gaveston was arrogant and insulted powerful nobles. Edward gave him estates, titles, and political power. The barons demanded Gaveston's exile repeatedly. Edward kept recalling him, creating political crisis. Isabella was caught between her husband and the English nobility. She had to maintain dignity despite public humiliation. She tried to mediate between Edward and the barons. She bore Edward 4 children, showing the marriage was consummated, despite Edward's preferences. Edward later Edward III, born 1312. John, Eleanor Joan. Gaveston's death 1312. The barons captured and executed Gaveston, solving one problem but creating lasting bitterness. Edward never forgave those responsible. Hugh Despenser the Younger. After Gaveston's death, Edward formed a new favorite relationship. Despenser was married to Eleanor de Clare, one of England's richest heiresses. He was greedy, ambitious, and politically astute. His relationship with Edward was probably also sexual. Unlike Gaveston, Despenser consolidated power ruthlessly. Despenser's hostility toward Isabella. Despenser saw Isabella as a threat. He reduced her household and income. He intercepted her correspondence. He turned Edward against her. he acquired some of her estates for himself. By the early 1320s, Isabella was effectively sidelined queen in name, but with little real power or even respect. The War of St. Sardos 1323-1325, a conflict over Gascony English territory in France, created Isabella's opportunity. The French king, now Charles IV, Isabella's brother, confiscated Gascony when Edward II failed to perform homage as the feudal vassal for the territory. War threatened, but Edward VI was reluctant to travel to France, fearing nobles might rebel in his absence, and that he'd be vulnerable abroad. Isabella proposed she would go to France as Edward's representative to negotiate. As the French king's sister, she could mediate. As Edward's wife, she could negotiate on England's behalf. This would avoid Edward having to leave England. Edward and Despenser agreed, probably glad to have Isabella away from England. The mission to France 1325-1326. In March 1325, Isabella traveled to France. She negotiated successfully. Charles IV agreed to peace. The terms required Edward II heir Prince Edward, age 12, to perform homage for Gascony. Young Edward was sent to France for the ceremony, but Isabella didn't return to England. Instead, she gathered supporters. Disaffected English nobles joined her in France, including Roger Mortimer, a powerful baron who had escaped from the Tower of London. Began an affair. Isabella and Mortimer became lovers. This was well known and scandalous. Planned invasion. Isabella and Mortimer gathered mercenaries and prepared to invade England to overthrow Edward II and Despenser. Her justification: she claimed she was defending her son's inheritance, arguing Despenser was corrupting Edward II, protecting England from tyranny, acting on behalf of the realm against evil counselors. The invasion, September 1326. Isabella and Mortimer invaded with a small force, perhaps 1,500 men. The number is debated. They landed at Orwell, Suffolk in September 1326. Remarkably, most of England rallied to Isabella. Despenser was hated. Edward II's rule had alienated nobles and commoners. Isabella's propaganda: she was a wronged wife, defending her son, acting against tyranny, was effective. Few were willing to fight for Edward II and Despenser. Edward II and Despenser fled westward into Wales, trying to escape by sea. They were captured in November 1326. Despenser was executed, brutally hanged, drawn, and quartered. His genitals were cut off and burned, possibly symbolically punishing his relationship with Edward. His body parts were displayed across England. Edward II was imprisoned at Kenilworth Castle, held by Henry of Lancaster, a relative. The Deposition, January 1327. Isabella and Mortimer summoned Parliament to deal with Edward VI. They faced a problem. Deposing an anointed king was unprecedented and theologically problematic. Kings received their authority from God. Removing them was potentially sacrilegious. The solution: Parliament declared Edward II had governed incompetently, allowed evil counselors to corrupt governance, lost the confidence of the realm, was incompetent to rule. Parliament declared Edward II deposed. He would be replaced by his son, Edward III, with Isabella and Mortimer as regents. This was revolutionary. While kings had been murdered or forced to abdicate before, this was the first time Parliament formally deposed a king through constitutional process. Edward II was forced to abdicate formally. He was kept imprisoned at Berkeley Castle. The murder of Edward II, September 1327. In September 1327, Edward II died at Berkeley Castle. The official story: natural causes. But no one believed this. The actual cause: he was almost certainly murdered. Contemporary rumors suggested he was killed with a red-hot poker, inserted anally, possibly symbolically punishing his alleged homosexuality. This story may be true, or it may be propaganda. More likely, he was smothered or otherwise killed less dramatically. The goal was to make the death seem natural, no external wounds. Isabella and Mortimer's involvement: they almost certainly ordered or approved the murder while Edward II lived. He was a potential focus for rebellion. His death secured young Edward III position. Timing suggests they wanted him dead once the deposition was secure. Isabella's reputation was permanently stained. She was now not just a rebel queen but a regicide, complicit in her husband's murder. The Regency 1327–1330. Isabella and Mortimer governed England as regents for the young Edward III, age 14 in 1327. Initially, the regency was popular, dispenser was gone. Peace with France was negotiated. Government seemed more stable. But problems emerged. Mortimer's greed. He accumulated titles, lands, and wealth. He became Earl of March. He took estates from rivals. He acted increasingly like a king rather than a regent. The relationship Isabella and Mortimer's affair was open and scandalous. Medieval society accepted royal mistresses, but found this relationship transgressive. Isabella was Queen Dowager. Mortimer was technically her subordinate. The relationship undermined their legitimacy. Brutal suppression. They crushed opposition ruthlessly. Edmund, Earl of Kent, Edward II half-brother, was executed on questionable charges 1330. This execution shocked nobles. Edmund was royal-blooded, and the charges seemed fabricated. Edward III, growing resentment as Edward III matured. He resented being controlled. He was king in name but powerless. Isabella and Mortimer made decisions without consulting him. They treated him as a puppet. The fall, October 1330. In October 1330, the 18-year-old Edward III struck at Nottingham Castle, where Isabella and Mortimer were staying. Edward and a group of loyal nobles entered through a secret tunnel and arrested Mortimer. Isabella reportedly cried out, "Fair son, have pity on gentle Mortimer," as he was seized, a plea that went unheeded. Mortimer was tried by Parliament on charges including usurping royal authority, the murder of Edward II, the execution of the Earl of Kent, various acts of tyranny. He was convicted and hanged at Tyburn in November 1330. His body was displayed for 2 days before burial. Isabella was not tried. She was Edward III's mother, and executing her would have been too shocking. But she was arrested and placed under house arrest. Stripped of much of her wealth, though given a comfortable allowance. Removed from political life completely. Retirement and death 1330–1358. For the final 28 years of her life, Isabella lived in comfortable confinement. She resided at various castles and estates. Castle Rising in Norfolk was her main residence. She had servants, comfort, and security. She was allowed visits from family, but she had no political role. Edward III treated her with respect befitting his mother. He visited occasionally. He provided for her material needs. He didn't allow her political involvement. She maintained religious devotions, patronized monasteries, and lived a life of pious retirement. She died in 1358 at approximately 63 years old, a good age for the medieval period. Burial. She was buried at Greyfriars Church in London, wearing her wedding dress and holding Edward II's heart, enclosed in a silver casket, a final ironic gesture after their troubled marriage. Isabella's legacy. Isabella of France's life was one of medieval history's most dramatic. The wronged wife, she was genuinely mistreated, neglected, humiliated, impoverished by dispenser, and essentially driven into rebellion by impossible circumstances. The rebel queen, she successfully overthrew a king, an extraordinary achievement, demonstrating both capability and ruthlessness. The regicide, her complicity in Edward II's murder, permanently stained her reputation. Medieval chroniclers condemned her for this. The lover, her relationship with Mortimer scandalized contemporaries and later historians. The she-wolf, this epithet appearing in later sources, possibly from Thomas Gray's poem in the 18th century, captured her reputation as beautiful, intelligent, and dangerous. Historical assessment. Medieval sources were hostile. Chroniclers disapproved of female rebellion and murder of kings. Modern historians recognize the complexity. She was pushed into impossible situations, but also showed genuine ruthlessness and ambition. She was neither pure victim nor simple villain, but a complex figure navigating and ultimately breaking medieval constraints on queenly behavior. Margaret of Anjou, 1430–1482, Queen of England, became one of medieval history's most controversial figures, a foreign queen who led armies, fought for her son's inheritance through decades of civil war, and became a symbol both of female strength and of the chaos of the Wars of the Roses. Her story reveals how queens, when pushed by circumstance and temperament, could become military leaders, but also how female involvement in warfare made them targets for particularly vicious propaganda. Birth and background, 1430 to 1445. Margaret was born in 1430 at Pont-à-Mousson, Lorraine, eastern France, daughter of René of Anjou and Isabella, Duchess of Lorraine. Her father was a fascinating figure, titular King of Naples, Sicily and Jerusalem, though he ruled none of these they were claims. Duke of Anjou and Count of Provence. Called Good King René for his cultural patronage. He was cultured, artistic, and perpetually involved in political schemes. Margaret's childhood was spent at her father's cultivated court. She received excellent education. She learned music, literature, and languages. She was exposed to chivalric culture and romance literature. She developed expectations of queenship, shaped by idealized literary models. The English marriage, 1445. In 1445, Margaret, age 15, married King Henry VI of England, age 23. The marriage was part of peace negotiations in the 100 Years' War. England and France had been fighting for over a century. Henry VI's advisors hoped marriage to a French princess would secure peace. Margaret brought no dowry. In fact, England gave up territories Maine and Anjou as part of the marriage agreement. This surrender made the marriage immediately unpopular in England. Henry VI was a problematic king, pious, gentle, and kind, unsuited to medieval kingship that valued martial prowess, uninterested in warfare or aggressive governance. Possibly mentally unstable, he suffered at least one complete mental breakdown in 1453-1454. Controlled by various noble factions competing for influence, Margaret entered a court riven by factionalism. The Duke of Suffolk dominated government. He had negotiated the marriage. The Duke of York represented opposition. Various nobles competed for power. She expected to be a great queen. Her literary education had taught her queens were powerful, influential figures. Reality would be more complicated and ultimately tragic. The early years, 1445-1453. Margaret's first years as queen were relatively quiet. She established her household and began participating in court life. She patronized arts and culture, trying to replicate her father's cultivated court. But political tensions grew. The 100 Years' War was going badly. English territories in France were lost, despite Margaret's marriage, which was supposed to secure peace. The Duke of Suffolk, Margaret's patron, was impeached, exiled, and murdered 1450, blamed for the failed French policy. Margaret had no child for years until 1453. Childless queens were politically vulnerable. The Duke of York emerged as an opposition leader. Richard, Duke of York, was immensely wealthy and had a credible claim to the throne, descendant of Edward IV through two lines. He criticized Henry VI's weak government. He positioned himself as a reformer. The crisis, 1453-1455. In August 1453, multiple crises converged. Henry VIII suffered a complete mental breakdown. He became catatonic, unable to speak, recognize people, or function. He remained in this state for over a year. Government was paralyzed. Margaret gave birth to Edward of Westminster, October 1453. This secured the succession. But it also made Margaret's position more complicated as mother of the heir. She had power but also made enemies. The Duke of York was appointed protector regent by Parliament during Henry's incapacity. This sidelined Margaret. York began appointing his supporters to offices. Margaret's allies were removed from power. When Henry V recovered late 1454/early 1455, Margaret worked to reverse York's actions. York was dismissed as protector. Margaret's allies were restored to power. York was excluded from court. This set the stage for civil war. The Wars of the Roses begin 1455-1461. The Wars of the Roses, civil wars between Lancastrian Henry VI's house and Yorkist factions, began in 1455. The First Battle of St. Albans, May 1455. Yorkist forces attacked Lancastrian nobles. Several of Margaret's key supporters were killed. Henry V was captured, though nominally on the Yorkist side. He was a prisoner. York again became dominant. Margaret became the de facto leader of the Lancastrian cause. Henry V was too weak mentally and temperamentally to lead. Margaret was fierce, determined, and willing to fight. She took control of Lancastrian strategy. Over the next years 1455–1461, fighting was sporadic Margaret's actions. She raised armies in the north where Lancastrian support was strongest. She negotiated with Scotland and France for support. She led the Lancastrian faction politically and militarily. The Battle of Wakefield, December 1460, Lancastrian forces won a major victory. Richard, Duke of York, was killed in battle. His severed head was displayed wearing a paper crown mocking his royal ambitions. Margaret's reputation for ruthlessness grew. The treatment of York's corpse was seen as cruel and unfeminine. The Second Battle of St. Albans, February 1461, Margaret's forces defeated the Yorkists. She rescued Henry Vai, who had been a Yorkist prisoner. This was a significant Lancastrian victory. But London refused to open its gates to Margaret's army. Margaret's army included northern troops, Scots, and mercenaries. Londoners feared pillaging. Anti-Margaret propaganda had portrayed her as a she-devil. This strategic failure would prove costly. Edward IV accession and Lancastrian defeat 1461. The Duke of York's son, Edward, later Edward IV, was young, charismatic, and militarily capable. The Battle of Toten, March 1461, the largest and bloodiest battle of the Wars of the Roses. Yorkist forces won decisively. Perhaps 28,000 plus men died, estimates vary. Lancastrian power was broken. Edward IV was crowned king. Henry VI and Margaret fled to Scotland with their son. Exile and continued resistance, 1461–1471. For the next decade, Margaret fought to restore Henry VI in Scotland, 1461–1463. She sought Scottish support. She negotiated unsuccessfully with foreign powers. She lived in poverty. England confiscated her lands and income. In France, 1463–1470, she sought support from Louis XI of France. She lived on French charity. She maintained a Lancastrian court in exile. The Redemption, 1470–1471, through an alliance with the Earl of Warwick, who had defected from Edward IV, Margaret returned to England. Henry VI was restored to the throne briefly in 1470. Margaret and her son Edward of Westminster returned to England. But Edward IV returned from exile in Burgundy with an army. The Battle of Barnet, April 1471. The Earl of Warwick, Margaret's ally, was killed. Lancastrian forces were defeated. The Battle of Tewkesbury, May 1471. Margaret's army was destroyed. Her son, Edward of Westminster, age 17, was killed during or after the battle. Margaret was captured. Henry Vichy died shortly after, May 1471, almost certainly murdered in the Tower of London. Officially, natural causes, but no one believed this. Margaret had lost everything: her husband dead, her son dead, her cause defeated. Final captivity and death, 1471–1482. Margaret was imprisoned for several years. She was held in various locations: the Tower of London, Windsor Castle, others. In 1475, Louis XI of France ransomed her. She returned to France. She renounced all claims to English lands and titles. She lived on a small French pension. Her final years were spent in poverty and obscurity. She was a broken woman. Everything she'd fought for was lost. She lived quietly, without political involvement. She died in 1482, at approximately 52 years old. Burial: she was buried at Angers Cathedral in Anjou, her family's territory. Margaret's reputation. Margaret of Anjou has been one of history's most vilified queens. Contemporary sources, mostly Yorkist aligned, portrayed her as adulteress, claiming Edward of Westminster wasn't Henry VI's son. Probably false propaganda. Bloodthirsty, exaggerating her cruelty. Unfeminine, condemning her military leadership. Foreign and malign, xenophobic attacks on her French origin. Shakespeare's portrayal in Henry V plays and Richard III depicted her as a scheming, cruel harridan. This shaped centuries of English popular opinion. Modern historians have reassessed her more sympathetically. She was thrust into leadership by her husband's incapacity. She fought for her son's inheritance, a natural maternal instinct. She demonstrated courage, determination, and political skill. She was facing an impossible situation, leading a faction in civil war, while being female in an era uncomfortable with female military leadership. The propaganda against her was extreme, even by medieval standards. The complexity: Margaret was neither innocent victim nor monstrous villain. She could be ruthless necessary in civil war. She made strategic errors failing to secure London after St. Albans. She faced extraordinary challenges with determination. She ultimately failed but fought for decades with remarkable tenacity. Not all medieval queens wielded power or lived long lives. Many faced accusations of adultery, treason, or witchcraft charges that were sometimes genuine but often political weapons. Understanding queens in peril reveals how vulnerable even the most privileged women were, and how queenship could be deadly. The special danger of queen consorts. Queen's consort faced unique vulnerabilities. The succession imperative queens had to produce legitimate heirs. Failure to bear children, especially sons, created political vulnerability. Adultery charges threatened legitimacy of heirs. Childless queens could be set aside through divorce or annulment. Political pawns. Queens were targets in factional politics. Destroying a queen could destroy her faction. Accusations against queens damaged kings politically. Queens couldn't defend themselves as effectively as male nobles. Sexual surveillance. Queens' bodies and sexual behavior were public concerns. Pregnancy and childbirth were monitored. Relationships with male courtiers were scrutinized. Any hint of impropriety could destroy reputations. Legal vulnerability. Queens could be tried and executed. Despite royal status, they could be accused of crimes. Treason charges against queens were politically useful. Execution of queens was rare, but not unknown. Berengaria of Navarre, the queen who never saw England. Not all queens in peril faced execution. Some faced abandonment. Berengaria of Navarre c. 1165, 12 Phil and 30 married King Richard II of England, Richard the Lionheart in 1191. The marriage was political, securing Navarre's support for the Third Crusade, providing Richard with a queen. But Richard spent almost no time with Berengaria. They married in Cyprus during the Crusade. Richard remained on crusade for years. After returning, he spent time in France, rarely in England. Berengaria never visited England during Richard's reign. She bore no children, whether because the marriage wasn't consummated, because Richard preferred men he had male favorites, or due to infertility is unknown. When Richard died 1199, Berengaria was left in difficult circumstances. Richard's brother John became king. John refused to pay Berengaria's dower widow's income. She spent years in poverty, appealing to the Pope for support. Eventually John paid, but she lived modestly. She died in 1230, having been Queen of England yet never seeing the kingdom, and living much of her widowhood in financial difficulty. Her story illustrates how queens could be marginalized and abandoned, technically honored, but actually powerless and poor. Joan of Navarre accused of witchcraft. Joan of Navarre c. 1370–1437 was Queen of England as wife of Henry IV. Her life was initially successful. Duchess of Brittany through first marriage. Queen of England through second marriage 1403. She had children from first marriage and stepchildren from Henry IV. After Henry IV died 1413, Joan was Queen Dowager under her stepson Henry V. In 1419, Joan was arrested on charges of witchcraft and treason. She was accused of plotting to kill Henry V through sorcery. The charges were almost certainly false political pretext to confiscate her wealth. Henry V needed money for the French campaign's 100 Years' War. Seizing Joan's dower income provided funds. She was imprisoned for several years in comfortable confinement at Leeds Castle and other locations. Henry V never formally tried her. The accusations served their purpose, confiscating her income without needing proof. After Henry V died 1422, his successor Henry Vizzy released Joan and restored her property 1422. She lived comfortably until her death in 1437. The incident demonstrates how queens could be targeted with false accusations for financial or political gain. Anne Boleyn executed Queen technically Tudor, but the pattern began earlier. While Anne Boleyn executed 1536 was Tudor rather than medieval, her case followed patterns established in earlier periods. Queens accused of adultery. Medieval precedents existed for queens accused of adultery facing execution. Ingeborg of Denmark c. 1176 c. 1238, wife of Philip Attu of France, was falsely accused and imprisoned for years before being vindicated. Joan of Naples, 1328-1382, was accused of murdering her first husband, charges likely false, though as Queen Regnant, she was harder to depose. The pattern: powerful men could destroy inconvenient queens through accusations of sexual misconduct. The queen's chastity was crucial for legitimacy of heirs. Adultery by a queen was treason, potentially bastardizing royal children. Accusations were hard to disprove. How does one prove a negative? Even acquittal often left reputations ruined. The case of Anne Boleyn, 1536, accused of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. Charged with treason. The charges were almost certainly fabricated by Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell. She was executed. Her daughter Elizabeth was declared illegitimate, though later reinstated and became Elizabeth I. This pattern had medieval roots. Queens were vulnerable to charges that couldn't easily be defended against. The punishment of queens. When queens were convicted of serious crimes, punishments varied. Execution, rare but not unknown, beheading was considered an honorable death reserved for nobility. Burning was used for heresy or witchcraft charges. Public execution of queens was scandalous and politically risky, attacking God's anointed. Imprisonment more common than execution. Eleanor of Aquitaine, imprisoned by Henry II, 16 years. Joan of Navarre, imprisoned by Henry V, 3 years. Various other queens held in comfortable confinement. Annulment/divorce, often preferable to execution. Eleanor of Aquitaine's marriage to Louis VII annulled. Various queens' marriages annulled on grounds of consanguinity, non-consummation, etc. This removed the queen without killing her. Less scandal. Divine retribution concerns avoided. Exile. Sometimes queens were simply sent away. Berengaria of Navarre essentially abandoned in France. Margaret of Anjou exiled after defeat. Forced monastic retirement. Queens could be forced into convents. This removed them from political life. It was considered honorable religious retirement. It prevented remarriage or children. The propaganda against queens. Failed or controversial queens faced systematic propaganda. Sexual accusations. Queen's morality was attacked. Adultery charges, real or false. Accusations of witchcraft or sorcery. Claims of unnatural sexual appetites. Insinuations about illegitimacy of children. Foreign origin. Queens from other countries faced xenophobia. Margaret of Anjou attacked as French. Eleanor of Provence, Henry III wife, attacked as Savoyard. Foreign queens were accused of favoring their countrymen over English interests. Unwomanly behavior. Queens who exercised power faced gendered attacks, called unfeminine for political activity. Accused of dominating weak husbands. Described as shrewish, aggressive, or masculine. Military leadership especially condemned. This propaganda often shaped historical memory. Queens remembered through hostile sources appeared far worse than the reality. Here we pause once more in our exploration of medieval queens. We have journeyed to the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem, with Melisende, who ruled in her own right, and fought to maintain her authority against husband and son. We have witnessed Isabella of France's dramatic rebellion, deposing her husband and ruling as regent before her own fall. We have followed Margaret of Anjou through decades of civil war, fighting desperately for her son's inheritance. And we have seen how queens in peril faced accusations, imprisonment, abandonment, and sometimes execution. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the precarious position of medieval queens, crowned and anointed, yet vulnerable to political machinations, dependent on bearing heirs yet punished for failure, expected to be submissive, yet sometimes thrust into leadership, honored in theory yet easily destroyed when politically convenient. The queen's crown was heavy not just with jewels, but with responsibilities and dangers. When we continue, we will explore more queens: Isabella of Castile, who unified Spain and sponsored Columbus; Marguerite of Provence; Eleanor of Aquitaine's worthy successor; the Byzantine Empresses who wielded power in the East; and the cultural achievements of medieval queens as patrons of arts, builders of institutions, and shapers of courtly culture. We will also examine daily life in the queen's household, the rituals of queenship, and the legacies these remarkable women left for future generations. But for now, rest. The stone castles where queens held court still stand across Europe. The crowns they wore rest in museums, and the memory of women who navigated medieval politics with intelligence, courage, and determination continues to inspire. Isabella of Castile, 1451-1504, stands at the threshold between medieval and early modern periods, a queen who inherited a fractured kingdom, fought a civil war for her throne, married to create a united Spain, completed the Reconquista, sponsored Columbus's voyage to the Americas, and established the Spanish Inquisition. She was perhaps the most powerful medieval queen, ruling in her own right and shaping not just her kingdom but world history. Her story reveals medieval queenship at its apex, but also its moral complexity, as her achievements included both extraordinary state building and religious persecution. Birth and childhood, 1451-1468. Isabella was born in 1451 in Madrigal de las Altas Torres, Castile, daughter of King John II of Castile and Isabella of Portugal, his second wife. Her father died when she was 1454, and her half-brother Henry became King Henry IV of Castile. Her childhood was difficult. Her mother moved the family to Aravello, a small town. They lived in relative poverty and isolation. Her mother suffered mental illness, possibly schizophrenia. Isabella and her younger brother Alfonso lived away from court. This childhood shaped Isabella profoundly. She learned piety and religious devotion. She developed independence and resourcefulness. She understood political instability and weakness. She received less formal education than many princesses, but was intelligent and learned quickly. The Succession Crisis, 1468-1474. King Henry IV reign was troubled by questions about succession. Henry's daughter Joanna, called La Belle Étrange, was born in 1462, but rumors suggested she wasn't Henry's daughter, but the result of his wife's affair with Beltrán de la Cueva. Henry had been married previously, and that marriage was annulled for non-consummation. Questions about his potency undermined Joanna's legitimacy. The nobility split between factions. Some supported Joanna as legitimate heir. Others supported Henry's half-siblings Isabella and Alfonso as rightful heirs. Civil conflict erupted periodically. In 1468, Isabella's brother Alfonso died suddenly, possibly poisoned, possibly natural causes. Isabella, age 17, became the alternative heir to Joanna. Henry IV attempted to control Isabella by arranging marriages. Various suitors were proposed: King of Portugal, Duke of Burgundy's brother, others. Isabella refused these marriages. She understood marriage would determine her political future. Isabella's secret marriage, 1469. Isabella made a bold decision. She secretly married Ferdinand of Aragon. Ferdinand, 1452-1516, was heir to the Kingdom of Aragon, eastern Spain, nearly the same age as Isabella, 1 year younger. Handsome, charismatic, and politically astute, his kingdom was smaller and poorer than Castile. The marriage would potentially unite Spain's two largest kingdoms. The marriage was conducted in secret. October 1469, without King Henry IV's permission, technically treasonous. Isabella traveled to Valladolid disguised to meet Ferdinand. They married with a small ceremony. A papal dispensation was needed. They were second cousins but used a possibly forged bull initially. King Henry IV was furious. He declared Isabella disinherited. He named Joanna as his heir. He attempted to have Isabella's marriage annulled. But Isabella and Ferdinand had support from powerful nobles who preferred them over Joanna. The Succession War, 1474-1479. Henry IV died in 1474. Immediately, competing claims emerged. Isabella proclaimed herself Queen of Castile and Segovia. She claimed legitimacy through her father's will. She argued Joanna was illegitimate. She had support from approximately half the nobility. Joanna was proclaimed queen by her supporters. She had the support of Portugal. She married King Alfonso V of Portugal. She had backing from approximately half the Castilian nobility. She had France's tacit support. War erupted between the two factions. Isabella and Ferdinand's advantages. Isabella's personal leadership. She traveled across Castile rallying support. Ferdinand's military skill. He commanded armies effectively. Superior organization and administration. Growing popular support. Isabella cultivated public image as pious and just. The Battle of Toro, 1476, a decisive engagement, militarily somewhat inconclusive. but psychologically a victory for Isabella. Alfonso V of Portugal withdrew, leaving Joanna's cause weakened. By 1479, the war effectively ended. Alfonso V of Portugal abandoned Joanna's cause. Most nobles submitted to Isabella. Joanna entered a convent forced retirement. Isabella was universally recognized as Queen of Castile. Joint rule Los Reyes Católicos, 1479-1504. In 1479, Ferdinand inherited Aragon on his father's death. Isabella and Ferdinand now ruled both kingdoms. The partnership was unusual and effective. The formula tanto monta, monta tanto, Isabel como Fernando, they amount to the same, Isabella and Ferdinand suggesting equality. The reality was more complex. Isabella was Queen of Castile in her own right, superior authority there. Ferdinand was King of Aragon in his own right, superior authority there. They ruled jointly, consulting on major decisions. Isabella was the senior partner in Castile, Ferdinand in Aragon. Both were strong-willed and occasionally clashed but generally worked together. Government reforms Isabella and Ferdinand centralized royal authority, the Santa Hermandad Holy Brotherhood, a rural police force to combat banditry, reduced noble lawlessness, strengthened royal authority in countryside. Control of nobility confiscated castles from over mighty nobles, reduced private armies, integrated nobles into royal service, created a more centralized state. Administrative reform professionalized bureaucracy, royal councils with trained administrators, improved tax collection, enhanced royal justice system. The Reconquista Granada 1482-1492. Isabella and Ferdinand completed the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Iberia from Muslim rule. The Emirate of Granada was the last Muslim state in Iberia, wealthy, cultured, and militarily capable, had survived for centuries through diplomacy and tribute. By the 1480s, internal divisions weakened it. The Granada War 1482-1492 was a systematic conquest. Isabella's role was crucial. She provided financial support, pawning her jewels. She organized supplies and logistics. She visited the front lines, inspecting troops and hospitals. She negotiated with Granada's factions. She embodied the crusading spirit. Ferdinand commanded militarily systematic siege warfare, captured cities one by one, eventually besieged Granada itself. In January 1492, Granada surrendered. Terms were initially generous. Muslims could remain, practice their religion, keep property. Isabella and Ferdinand entered Granada in triumph. The Reconquista was complete after nearly 800 years. This victory had enormous symbolic significance. Spain was now entirely Christian officially. Isabella and Ferdinand were celebrated across Christian Europe. They earned the title Catholic monarchs Los Reyes Católicos from the Pope. The Spanish Inquisition 1478. One of Isabella's most controversial acts was establishing the Spanish Inquisition. The context: large numbers of conversos Jews converted to Christianity, often under pressure. Suspicions that many conversos secretly practiced Judaism. Political desire to create religious uniformity. Economic motivations confiscating conversos' property. In 1478, Isabella and Ferdinand received papal permission to establish the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition differed from earlier medieval inquisitions. It was under royal control, not purely ecclesiastical. It focused on converts suspected of heresy, not openly non-Christian populations initially. It used systematic investigation, torture, and execution. The methods: secret denunciations, neighbors could accuse others anonymously. Torture to extract confessions. Auto da fe, public ceremonies of penance and execution. Burning at the stake for unrepentant heretics. The first Grand Inquisitor was Tomás de Torquemada, 1483-1498, Dominican friar, zealous and ruthless. Under his leadership, the Inquisition executed perhaps 2,000 people. Many more were punished through confiscation, public humiliation, or forced penance. Isabella's responsibility: she established and supported the Inquisition. She believed religious uniformity was necessary for political unity. She genuinely thought she was saving souls and protecting Christianity. She approved of the methods, believing heresy was worse than death. By modern standards, this was state-sponsored religious persecution. The expulsion of the Jews 1492. In March 1492, Isabella and Ferdinand issued the Alhambra decree. All Jews in Spain were ordered to convert to Christianity, or leave Spain within 4 months. The justification: Jews were accused of encouraging conversos to return to Judaism. Religious uniformity was deemed necessary. Economic motivations: confiscating property. The result: perhaps 40,000, 100,000 Jews left Spain. Numbers are debated. Some converted to remain. Many of these later faced Inquisition persecution. Jews fled to Portugal, which later also expelled them, North Africa, Ottoman Empire, other destinations. Spain lost a productive, educated population. Sephardic Jewish diaspora spread across Mediterranean and beyond. Isabella's role: she fully supported the expulsion. She believed Catholic uniformity was essential. She thought Jewish presence threatened conversos' faith. She apparently had no moral qualms about the policy. By modern standards, this was ethnic cleansing, forced conversion or expulsion, based on religion/ethnicity. Columbus and the New World, 1492. Also in 1492, Isabella made a decision that would change world history. Christopher Columbus, a Genoese sailor, had been seeking patronage for a westward voyage to Asia. He believed he could reach the Indies by sailing west. He had been rejected by Portugal and initially by Spain. Isabella reconsidered and agreed to sponsor Columbus. The conquest of Granada freed resources. The potential rewards: trade route to Asia were enormous. Columbus's terms were reasonable. He would pay if successful. Crown would bear costs if he failed. Isabella's religious motivation: spreading Christianity to new lands, aligned with the project. Columbus departed in August 1492 and returned in March 1493. He had reached the Caribbean, thinking he'd reached the Indies. He brought back gold samples, native people, and exotic goods. He reported vast lands for potential conquest and conversion. Isabella supported subsequent voyages: 3 more Columbus expeditions, 1493, 1498, 1502. Other explorers followed. Spanish colonization of the Americas began. Isabella's concern was religious conversion. She insisted native people be treated as subjects, not slaves initially. She wanted them converted to Christianity. She opposed enslavement of native people, though enforcement was weak. Later Spanish treatment of natives would become horrific, but Isabella's stated policy was relatively humane for her time. The irony: Isabella expelled Jews and persecuted heretics in Spain, while claiming to want to bring Christianity to America's native peoples. Her religious zeal was both crusading and proselytizing. Family and succession. Isabella and Ferdinand had 5 children who survived infancy. Isabella, 1470-1498, married first to Alfonso of Portugal, died, then Manuel II of Portugal, died in childbirth. John, 1478-1497, heir to both kingdoms, died young from illness/exhaustion, possibly from excessive marital relations. Sources suggest his health was fragile. Joanna, 1479-1555, called Joanna the Mad, inherited Castile. Married Philip the Handsome of Burgundy, had mental illness. Her son Charles became Holy Roman Emperor. Charles v. Maria, 1482-1517, Queen of Portugal through marriage. Catherine, 1485-1536, Catherine of Aragon, first wife of Henry VIII of England, mother of Mary I. Her divorce from Henry led to English Reformation. Succession anxieties plagued Isabella's later years. John's death devastated them. Isabella of Portugal's death in childbirth lost them their presumed heir. Joanna's mental instability created concerns. Isabella worried about the succession. Death, 1504. Isabella died in November 1504 at Medina del Campo, age 53. Her final illness was probably cancer or another wasting disease. Her will named Joanna her heir. Appointed Ferdinand as regent if Joanna couldn't govern. Requested modest burial, insisted on humane treatment of indigenous Americans. She was buried at the Royal Chapel in Granada, built for this purpose, eventually joined by Ferdinand, died 1516. Isabella's legacy. Isabella of Castile's legacy is extraordinary but morally complex. Achievements: united Spain with Ferdinand into a major European power. Completed the Reconquista after 800 years. Sponsored Columbus, initiating Spanish colonization of Americas. Centralized royal authority, creating a more effective state. patronized arts and learning, governed effectively as Queen Regnant. Negative aspects: established the Spanish Inquisition, expelled the Jews, initiated policies that led to persecution of Muslims after her death. They were also expelled. Her colonial policies, despite stated intentions, led to catastrophic treatment of indigenous Americans. Historical assessment: medieval/early modern contemporaries mostly admired her. Later Catholic tradition sometimes portrayed her as near saintly, though she was never canonized. Modern historians recognize both her capability and the moral problems with her policies. She was a product of her time. Religious intolerance was normal. But even by contemporary standards, the Inquisition and expulsions were controversial. She demonstrated that medieval queens could be extraordinarily powerful, ruling kingdoms, commanding armies through subordinates, and shaping history. But power doesn't guarantee moral wisdom. While Western Europe's medieval queens navigated feudal politics, the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, surviving until 1453, developed its own tradition of powerful empresses. Byzantine empresses like Theodora and Irene wielded power in different contexts than Western queens, sometimes as company rulers with equal authority, sometimes as regents, and always within a more autocratic imperial system that was paradoxically both more restrictive and more enabling of female power. The Byzantine context. Byzantine culture shaped imperial women's roles differently than in the West, the imperial system more centralized and autocratic than Western feudalism. Emperors had near absolute authority in theory. Complex bureaucracy and court hierarchy. Religious authority intertwined with political power. Constantinople was the administrative, economic, and cultural center. The purple-born special status for children born to reigning emperors called porphyrogenitus/porphyrogenita, born in the purple. These individuals had special legitimacy. Daughters born in the purple were highly prestigious marriage partners. Court ceremonial, elaborate ritual-governed court life. Empresses had specific ceremonial roles. Visual representations, mosaics, icons showed empresses alongside emperors. Empresses were crowned and anointed. They had official positions in hierarchy. Seclusion and visibility paradox. Elite women were supposed to be secluded more so than in Western Europe. But empresses were public figures, appearing in processions and ceremonies. This created tension between ideals and reality. Theodora 505048, from actress to Augusta. Theodora is one of history's most remarkable rags to riches stories. Her background was scandalous by Byzantine standards. Born around 500, daughter of a bear keeper at the Hippodrome Circus. Worked as an actress considered disreputable, associated with prostitution. Had a child out of wedlock. Traveled to North Africa as a courtesan. She met Justinian, nephew of Emperor Justin I, around 522. He fell in love with her. He wanted to marry her. But law forbade senators from marrying actresses. Justin I changed the law to permit the marriage. They married around 525. In 527, Justin I died, and Justinian became Emperor Justinian I, making Theodora Empress. Theodora's power as Empress was extraordinary. Company ruler, Justinian treated Theodora as an equal partner. She was titled Augusta Empress. Laws were issued in both names. She held her own court and received foreign ambassadors. She made policy decisions independently. The Nika riots 532, Theodora's finest moment, a massive riot in Constantinople, threatened to overthrow Justinian. The faction's circus teams, with political affiliations, revolted. Much of the city was burned. Rioters proclaimed a new emperor. Justinian's advisors urged him to flee. Theodora reportedly gave a speech. Purple makes an excellent burial shroud. Death as emperor is preferable to living in exile. She urged Justinian to stay and fight. Her courage stiffened Justinian's resolve. Justinian stayed. Loyal troops crushed the revolt. Perhaps 30,000 people were killed, and the imperial couple's authority was restored. Without Theodora's intervention, Justinian might have fled and lost the throne. She saved the empire. Her policies: women's rights. Theodora improved laws affecting women, laws against forced prostitution, protection for actresses who wanted to leave the profession, property rights for women, prosecution of rape. Religious policy. C. She supported Monophysite Christians, a theological position condemned as heretical by the official church. She protected Monophysite clergy. She maintained a Monophysite monastery in the palace. This created tension. Justinian supported Orthodox position, but demonstrated her independent authority. Patronage. She commissioned churches and public buildings, including the Hagia Sophia, the great church in Constantinople, though Justinian was the primary patron. Procopius's secret history. The historian Procopius wrote official histories praising Justinian and Theodora, but also a secret history unpublished during his lifetime that viciously attacked them. He portrayed Theodora as sexually insatiable and depraved. He claimed she had been a prostitute who performed degrading acts. He accused her of cruelty and corruption. Modern historians debate the secret history's reliability. Procopius had personal grievances. Byzantine culture had misogynistic elements. Powerful women were threatening. Some accusations are clearly exaggerated or false, but some may have kernels of truth. Her early life was probably difficult. The secret history reveals more about Byzantine attitudes toward women and power than about historical truth. Theodora died in 548, probably cancer. Justinian lived until 565 and reportedly never recovered from her death emotionally. Her legacy. She demonstrated that even women from the lowest social origins could, through intelligence and force of personality, become empress and company ruler of the empire. Irene of Athens 752, 803, the empress who ruled alone. Irene was the first Byzantine woman to rule as emperor, not merely empress consort in her own name. Her background: born in Athens around 752 to a noble family. Beautiful, intelligent, and well-educated. In 768, she married Leo IV, company emperor with his father, later sole emperor. As empress consort 769, 780, she bore a son, Constantine, later Constantine VI. She was devoutly Orthodox. Her husband Leo IV died in 780, leaving their son aged 10 as emperor. First Regency 780-790. Irene became regent for young Constantine VI. Her major achievement was restoring icon veneration. Iconoclasm. Icon smashing had dominated Byzantine religious policy for decades. Iconoclasts believed religious images were idolatrous. They destroyed icons, mosaics, and religious art. This was official imperial policy. Irene supported iconophiles, icon venerators. She believed icons were holy and beneficial. In 787, she convened the Second Council of Nicaea. The council restored icon veneration as orthodox. This was a major theological and artistic triumph. But as Constantine VI matured, he resented Irene's control. In 790, Constantine staged a coup. He exiled Irene temporarily. He began ruling independently. But he proved incompetent. By 792, Irene was recalled and given some authority again. The blinding 797, Constantine VI's incompetence and unpopular policies weakened his position. Irene staged a counter-coup on August 15, 797. Irene had Constantine VI arrested and blinded. Blinding was a Byzantine method of disqualifying someone from rule. The blinding was so severe that Constantine died from the wounds or from complications. This was matricide in effect. Irene killed her own son. The justifications from Irene's perspective: Constantine was incompetent and threatening the empire. He had planned to remove Irene. She struck first. The empire needed effective leadership. The reality: it was a brutal act by any standard, murdering her son to seize sole power. Irene as emperor 797-802. Irene ruled as emperor, not empress, from 797-82. She used the masculine title Basilius Emperor rather than feminine Basilissa Empress. This demonstrated she ruled in her own right, not as consort. Byzantine coinage and official documents called her Basilius. Her policies: religious, continued supporting icon veneration and Orthodox Christianity. Taxation: reduced some taxes, seeking popularity but weakening finances. Foreign policy: generally defensive and cautious. The marriage proposal: some sources debated by historians claim Charlemagne proposed marriage to Irene. This would have united Western and Eastern empires. Whether the proposal was genuine is uncertain. If true, Irene apparently considered it, but nothing came of it. Her overthrow 802 Irene's gender, and some unpopular policies created opposition in 802. A conspiracy of officials overthrew Irene. They declared Nikephoros I emperor. Irene was exiled to Lesbos. She died in exile in 803, age approximately 51. Her short-lived regime demonstrated that a woman could rule the Byzantine Empire as emperor. But without a male company ruler or heir, her position was vulnerable. Byzantine officials and military weren't ready to accept permanent female rule. Irene's legacy controversial. She restored icons seen as pious by supporters, politically motivated by critics, but murdered her son, condemned even by supporters. Precedent. She showed Byzantine women could rule as emperors, not just empresses consort. Complex figure, neither villain nor saint, but a capable, ruthless politician who achieved power through murder and ruled competently but briefly. Other notable Byzantine empresses. Several other Byzantine empresses wielded significant power. Pulcheria, 399–453, sister of Emperor Theodosius II, effectively governed during his reign, promoted Orthodox Christianity, convened church councils. After Theodosius's death, she married Marcian and effectively made him emperor, though she retained authority. Zoe Porphyrogenita 978–50, born in the purple, she ruled alongside 3 husbands, and finally with her sister Theodora. She was empress in her own right through birth, and her husbands derived legitimacy from marrying her. Theodora Porphyrogenita 984–1056, Zoe's sister, ruled jointly with Zoe, and then alone 1055–1056. She was the last of the Macedonian dynasty. Anna Komnene 1083–1153, not empress, but author. She wrote the Alexiad, a historical work about her father Emperor Alexios I. She was highly educated and attempted unsuccessfully to help her husband seize the throne. Her Alexiad is one of the finest Byzantine historical works. Byzantine empresses' unique position. Byzantine empresses had different experiences than Western queens' more autocratic system. The Byzantine Empire was more centralized. Empresses within the system had potentially more power than Western queens, but the system was also more rigid. Religious authority. Byzantine empresses had religious roles. They patronized churches, influenced theological disputes, and were depicted in religious art alongside emperors. Born in the purple advantage, daughters of emperors had legitimacy. Western princesses often lacked. They could make emperors through marriage. But also seclusion. Byzantine elite women were supposed to be more secluded than Western noblewomen, creating tension between public role and private seclusion. Visual evidence. Byzantine mosaics and coins show empresses prominently, visual representations of power that survived to demonstrate their status. Beyond political power, medieval queens profoundly influenced culture. As patrons of arts, architecture, literature, and learning, queens shaped medieval civilization. Their patronage commissioned manuscripts, built cathedrals, supported scholars, and created cultural legacies outlasting their political achievements. Queens as builders. Royal women were major architectural patrons. Eleanor of Aquitaine renovated palaces in Poitiers and England. Supported construction at monasteries. Fontevraud Abbey, where she eventually was buried. Her courts in Poitiers became centers of architectural and artistic innovation. Blanche of Castile built and renovated castles for defense and administration. Supported cathedral construction. Commissioned the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, though often attributed to her son Louis IX. She was involved in planning and financing. Isabella of Castile built the Royal Chapel in Granada, burial place for her and Ferdinand. Supported construction of churches in conquered territories. Renovated palaces and administrative buildings. Byzantine empresses Theodora and Justinian built the Hagia Sophia, one of history's great architectural achievements. Various empresses commissioned churches, monasteries, and charitable institutions. The motivations for building: religious devotion, churches, monasteries. Political legitimacy, monumental buildings demonstrated power and permanence. Personal legacy buildings survived as memorials. Practical governance, palaces, fortifications, administrative buildings. Queens as patrons of manuscripts and literature. Medieval manuscripts were expensive, labor-intensive, and precious. The Melisende Psalter, commissioned by, or for Queen Melisende of Jerusalem, 12th century. An illuminated Psalter book of Psalms combining Western and Byzantine artistic styles. Demonstrates the cultural synthesis of Crusader kingdoms. One of the finest surviving medieval manuscripts. The Bury St. Edmund's Psalter, possibly commissioned by a noble woman, identity debated. Shows female patronage of religious art. Queens commissioned devotional books, Psalters, Books of Hours. Historical chronicles. Literary works, romances, poetry. Genealogies establishing family legitimacy. Christine de Pizan, 1364-1430, Italian-French author, not a queen but relevant to queenly patronage. Supported by various noble women including Queen Isabeau of Bavaria. Wrote the Book of the City of Ladies defending women's capabilities. Her career depended on female patronage. Courtly love literature. Eleanor of Aquitaine and her daughter Marie de Champagne patronized troubadours and poets. Poets, who wrote in Occitan Southern French about courtly love. They idealized noble women as objects of devotion. They created a literary tradition, elevating at least rhetorically women's status. Eleanor's court in Poitiers was a center of this culture. Marie de Champagne, Eleanor's daughter, patronized Creation. De Troyes. Creation wrote Arthurian romances including Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart. These romances featured strong, admirable female characters. Marie reportedly requested Creation write about Lancelot and Guinevere's love. This literary tradition created cultural space for discussing women's roles. Produced literature that still read today. Demonstrated queens' cultural influence. Queens as patrons of learning. Some queens supported education and scholarship. Matilda of Scotland, Queen of England, wife of Henry I, d. 1118, literate in multiple languages. Supported scholars and religious houses. Corresponded with theologian Anselm of Canterbury. Eleanor of Castile, Queen of England, wife of Edward I, d. 1290, brought Spanish cultural influences to England. Patronized scholars and architects. The Eleanor crosses, monuments built by Edward I after her death, demonstrate her cultural impact. Isabella of Castile promoted learning and scholarship. Supported humanist scholars. Insisted her daughters receive excellent educations. Her daughter Catherine of Aragon was one of England's most learned women. Byzantine Empresses. Anna Komnene was herself a scholar and historian. Various empresses supported universities and libraries in Constantinople. Religious patronage. Queen's most visible patronage was religious, founding monasteries and convents, provided spiritual benefits, prayers for queens' souls. Created institutions that educated, cared for poor, and preserved learning. Gave queens power bases, monasteries they founded owed loyalty to them. Examples: Fontevraud Abbey, patronized by Eleanor of Aquitaine, became burial site for Plantagenet dynasty. Various Cistercian monasteries patronized by queens. Convents specifically for noble women, providing respectable retirement for women. Supporting religious orders, queens patronized Franciscans, Dominicans, and other mendicant orders. They supported hospitals and charitable institutions. They commissioned religious art and architecture. Relic collection. Queens acquired and donated religious relics. Relics brought prestige and spiritual benefits. Churches with royal relics attracted pilgrims and donations. Charitable work. Queens were expected to demonstrate Christian charity. Almsgiving. Queens distributed food and money to the poor. Royal households fed hundreds of people daily. Special distributions on religious holidays. Hospitals and care facilities. Queens founded hospitals for the sick. Leprosaria. Leper hospitals were frequent objects of royal charity. Maternity hospitals and foundling hospitals. Blanche of Castile, known for extensive charity. Distributed alms personally. Founded charitable institutions. Isabella of Castile supported hospitals and charitable foundations. Visited and supported leper hospitals personally. Her charitable work was extensive, though coexisted uncomfortably with Inquisition policies. The politics of patronage. Queen's patronage wasn't purely altruistic, building loyalty. Patronage created networks of clients. Artists, scholars, clergy, and others owed queens gratitude. These networks could be mobilized politically. Demonstrating piety. Religious patronage showed queens were good Christians. This gave them moral authority. It countered criticisms women exercising power faced accusations of impropriety. Legitimacy. Monumental building and art demonstrated royal permanence. Cultural achievements showed queens weren't just decorative, but contributed substantially to society. Rivalry. Queens sometimes competed through patronage. More magnificent patronage demonstrated superior wealth and status. Legacy creation. Cultural patronage outlasted political achievements. Buildings and manuscripts survived as memorials. Queens consciously built legacies through patronage. The impact on medieval culture. Queen's patronage significantly shaped medieval civilization. Architectural legacy. Many of Europe's greatest medieval buildings were built with Queen's patronage or participation. Literary tradition. Courtly literature, partially shaped by queenly patronage, influenced Western literary tradition for centuries. Religious institutions. Monasteries, convents, and charitable foundations established by queens provided education, healthcare, and social services for centuries. Cultural transmission. Queens moving between kingdoms brought cultural influences with them. Eleanor from Aquitaine to France and England, Isabella of France bringing French culture to England, etc. Women's opportunities. Queen's patronage created opportunities for other women as artists, writers, religious figures, and scholars. Visual culture. Illuminated manuscripts, religious art, and architectural decoration, commissioned by queens, shaped medieval visual culture. The paradox. Queens were officially subordinate to kings and male authority. Yet through patronage, they exercised substantial cultural power and shaped civilization in lasting ways. Behind the grand political narratives and cultural achievements, medieval queens lived daily lives with specific routines, rituals, and realities. Understanding the queen's household reveals how queenship functioned practically. The servants, ceremonies, spaces, and daily activities that filled a queen's days. The queen's household. Queens maintained separate households from king's personnel. The queen's household included ladies-in-waiting, noblewomen attending the queen, providing companionship and assistance. Chamberlains managing the queen's private apartments. Chaplains, priests serving the queen's spiritual needs. Secretaries and clerks, handling correspondence and administrative work. Stewards managing finances and provisioning. Servants, cooks, laundresses, cleaners, grooms, and various specialized servants. Size. A queen's household could include 100-300 plus people for a major queen. Smaller for less powerful queens. Byzantine empresses had particularly large households. Household size demonstrated status and resources. Organization. Hierarchical structure with officials managing different departments. Chambers, private apartments, hall, public space, chapel, kitchens, stables, etc. Complex protocol governing access and interaction. Finances. Queens had independent income, dower, lands, assigned revenues, gifts. They managed their own finances. This economic independence gave them power. The queen's chambers. The physical spaces where queens lived. The private apartments, bedroom, the most private space. Antechamber for dressing and receiving close attendance. Presence chamber for receiving visitors. Chapel for private devotions. Furnishings, beds with expensive hangings, curtains for privacy and warmth. Chairs, status symbols. Most people sat on stools or benches. Chests for storing clothes, valuables, and documents. Tapestries on walls, insulation and decoration. Candles and torches. Light was expensive. Temperature and comfort. Castles were cold and drafty. Fireplaces provided some heat. Clothes were layered for warmth. Windows had shutters but often no glass or very expensive glass. Privacy. Relative privacy compared to most people, but never truly alone. Servants and attendants always present. Protocol governed who could enter various chambers. The queen's daily routine. A typical day for a medieval queen. Specifics varied by time, place, and individual. Morning. Dawn, around 5-7 a.m. depending on season, waking and dressing assisted by ladies-in-waiting. Morning prayers in the chapel. Attendance at mass. Breaking fast. Light meal, bread, ale or wine, perhaps cheese. Mid-morning administrative work, reviewing accounts, correspondence. Audiences with petitioners. Meetings with officials. Needlework or other occupations for noblewomen. Elaborate embroidery was a status activity. Midday dinner. The main meal, typically around 10 a.m. to noon. Multiple courses for royalty. Meats, fish, elaborate dishes. Eaten in hall with household and guests. Entertainment music, perhaps jesters. Afternoon, more administrative work or audiences. Walking in gardens, weather permitting. Reading or being read to. Visiting the sick or charitable activities. Needlework, music, or games. Chess was popular among nobility. Evening supper, lighter meal than dinner, around 4-6 p.m. Evening entertainment, music, storytelling, conversation. Vespers or evening prayers. Retiring to chambers relatively early by modern standards, around 8-9 p.m. Variations, this routine would be disrupted by travel. Queens moved frequently between residences. Ceremonial events, royal entries, coronations, festivals. Childbirth requiring weeks of preparation and recovery. Political crises. Personal preferences, some queens were more active, others more secluded. Childbirth and pregnancy. Childbirth was queen's most dangerous regular activity. Pregnancy, recognized relatively late, several missed menstrual cycles. No prenatal care by modern standards. Queens continued most activities during pregnancy. Growing restrictions in late pregnancy. Preparation, the taking to chamber in the final month. Queens retreated to private chambers. Windows were covered, creating dim, warm environment believed beneficial. Only women allowed, midwives, female attendants. Religious preparation, prayers, relics. The birth, attended by midwives, experienced women, some highly skilled. Physicians might be consulted but usually stayed outside. Queens gave birth in a birthing chair or bed. Labor could last hours or days. No effective pain relief, perhaps herbal preparations of limited efficacy. High risk of complications, infection, hemorrhage, obstructed labor. Postpartum, lying in period, 40 days of rest and seclusion. Gradual return to normal activities. Churching ceremony, religious purification and thanksgiving. The dangers, maternal mortality was high, perhaps 1-3% per birth. Multiple births meant cumulative risk. Queens who had 10+ children faced substantial lifetime risk of dying in childbirth. Many queens died in childbirth or from postpartum complications. The rewards, successful childbirth, especially of sons, strengthened queens' positions. Mothers of heirs had political leverage. Large families were seen as blessings. Ceremonial and public duties. Queens had public roles requiring ceremony, coronations, separate ceremonies for queens or joint with kings. Religious anointing, making them sacred persons. Crown and regalia, public display and feasting. Royal entries, when queens visited cities, elaborate ceremonies welcomed them. Processions, pageants, speeches. Demonstrations of loyalty and power. Christmas, Easter, and major feasts. Kings and queens held court on major holidays. Elaborate feasts, gift-giving, entertainment. Opportunities to display wealth and generosity. Political functions, assembling nobles for consultation. Churching ceremonies after childbirth, public ceremony of purification and thanksgiving. Reintroduction to public life. Funerals, queens attended royal funerals. Eventually had their own elaborate ceremonies, tombs, commemorations. Religious observance, queens were expected to demonstrate public piety. Attendance at mass and other services. Pilgrimages sometimes. Religious donations and foundations. Travel and movement. Medieval queens traveled frequently. Reasons for travel, following the itinerant court, kings moved between residences. Pilgrimage. Managing estates, inspecting properties. Diplomatic missions. Fleeing danger, war, plague, political crises. The logistics, large entourages, household, guards, servants. Wagons for baggage, furniture and valuables. Travel was slow, perhaps 20-30 miles per day. Inns for lesser travelers, monasteries or nobles' homes for royalty. Traveling was uncomfortable, expensive and sometimes dangerous. Queen's attire, special traveling clothes, more practical than ceremonial dress. Riding horses or traveling in litters/wagons. Communications, queens maintained extensive correspondence, letters, dictated to secretaries. Queens might sign or add personal notes. Sent by messenger, royal messengers traveled fast. Wax seals for authentication. Topics: political matters, negotiating with nobles, giving orders. Diplomatic correspondence with foreign rulers. Personal letters to daughters married abroad, family. Administrative matters, estate management. Literacy, most queens were literate at least in vernacular languages. Many knew Latin for religious and administrative purposes. Some knew multiple languages. Eleanor of Aquitaine knew Occitan, French, and Latin. Literacy gave queens power. They could read documents themselves, not relying solely on advisors. Leisure and entertainment. Despite busy schedules, queens had leisure activities. Music. Queens patronized musicians. Some queens played instruments. Court entertainment included songs, instrumental music. Literature. Queens read or listened to romances, religious texts, histories. Books were expensive luxury items. Reading was a status activity. Games. Chess was very popular among nobility, seen as intellectually stimulating. Board games, dice games, cards. Later medieval period. Hunting. Some queens hunted. Hawking was especially popular for noblewomen. Hunting combined recreation with demonstration of aristocratic status. Gardens. Queens' gardens provided pleasant spaces for walking, conversation. Herb gardens provided medicines and cooking ingredients. Ornamental gardens demonstrated wealth and culture. Needlework. Elite women's needlework was elaborate embroidery, tapestry. Some queens created famous works. The Bayeux Tapestry, possibly commissioned by a queen. Combining creativity, skill, and social activity. The realities. Queens' daily lives combined extraordinary privilege with real constraints. Privilege. Material comfort by medieval standards. Power and influence. Access to culture and learning. Honor and status. Constraints. Constant surveillance, never truly private. Limited physical freedom. Pressure to produce heirs. Political vulnerabilities. Danger. Childbirth, political violence, disease. The variation. Not all queens lived identically. Personality, circumstances, and era created different experiences. But the household, ceremonies, and daily routines provided common frameworks within which medieval queens lived their lives. Here we pause once more in our exploration of medieval queens. We have stood with Isabella of Castile as she unified Spain, completed the Reconquista, and sponsored Columbus while also establishing the Inquisition and expelling the Jews, demonstrating power's moral complexity. We have witnessed Byzantine Empresses Theodora and Irene wielding power in the Eastern Roman Empire, sometimes as company rulers, sometimes as emperors in their own right. We have explored queens' cultural patronage, the buildings, manuscripts, and institutions they created that shaped medieval civilization. And we have entered the queen's household, seeing daily routines, ceremonies, and realities that filled medieval queens' lives. As you drift toward sleep, imagine a medieval queen in her chamber's candlelight illuminating a letter she's dictating to her daughter married to a foreign prince, tapestries moving slightly in drafts, ladies in waiting quietly embroidering nearby, and the weight of crown, responsibilities, and the day's political maneuvering gradually lifting as night settles over the castle. When we conclude, we will reflect on the collective legacy of medieval queens, what they achieved despite constraints, how individual women transcended limitations, the patterns connecting their experiences across centuries and regions, and what their lives teach us about gender, power, and historical change. We will also acknowledge the limitations of our knowledge, the silences in historical records, the queens we know little about, and the countless noblewomen whose stories were never recorded. But for now, rest. The medieval world fades into history, but the memory of queens who shaped it through intelligence, courage, determination, and sometimes ruthlessness continues to inspire and instruct. For every Eleanor of Aquitaine or Isabella of Castile, whose names echo through history, dozens of medieval queens lived, ruled, influenced, and died, leaving only fragmentary traces in historical records. Some were deliberately obscured by hostile chroniclers, some simply didn't generate the dramatic events that attract historical attention, and some served in roles that medieval and modern historians considered less significant than warfare and politics. Understanding these forgotten or overlooked queens reveals how selective historical memory is, and how many capable, interesting women history has marginalized or lost. Why queens are forgotten. Several factors cause queens to disappear from historical memory. Limited sources. Medieval chronicles focused primarily on kings, wars, and church affairs. Queens' activities, household management, cultural patronage, informal influence were less likely to be recorded. Administrative documents survive unevenly, many destroyed over centuries. Queens who didn't participate in dramatic events left fewer traces. Hostile chroniclers. Medieval writers were predominantly male clergy. They often disapproved of women exercising power. Queens who challenged norms might be condemned or ignored. Later historians often relied uncritically on these biased sources. The great man theory of history, traditional history focused on kings, generals, and popes. Queens were seen as supporting characters or romantic interests. Women's contributions were minimized. This approach dominated historiography until relatively recently. Successful obscurity. Some queens deliberately maintained low profiles, politically safer. Effective governance that avoided crises is less dramatic than wars and rebellions. Quiet competence doesn't generate the dramatic narratives that capture historical attention. Modern recovery. Recent decades have seen increased scholarly interest in recovering women's history, including forgotten queens. But much remains lost, and some queens will never be fully known. Matilda of Boulogne c. 1105–1152, the queen who saved her husband. Matilda of Boulogne was Queen of England as wife of King Stephen, yet she's often overshadowed by the civil war's other Matilda, Empress Matilda, her background Countess of Boulogne, in her own right wealthy, strategically important territory. Married Stephen of Blois. Later King Stephen, around 1125, brought significant resources and legitimacy to Stephen's claim. During the anarchy 1135–1153, while Empress Matilda fought for the throne, Matilda of Boulogne defended Stephen's cause. When Stephen was captured at Lincoln 1141, Matilda of Boulogne raised an army. She besieged Empress Matilda in Winchester, forcing her to flee. She negotiated Stephen's exchange and release. Her military and political leadership was crucial to Stephen's survival, yet she's often reduced to a footnote in narratives focused on the two Matildas' conflict or Stephen's incompetence. She died in 1152, shortly before the war's resolution. Without her military intervention in 1141, Stephen would probably have lost his throne. Modern historians increasingly recognize her importance, but she remains far less famous than Empress Matilda or Eleanor of Aquitaine. Marguerite of Provence 1221, 1295, Eleanor's worthy successor. Marguerite of Provence, Queen of France as wife of Louis IX, Saint Louis, was an extraordinarily capable woman overshadowed by her mother-in-law Blanche of Castile and her husband's saintly reputation. Her accomplishments accompanied Louis IX on Crusade, Seventh Crusade, 1248–1254. When Louis was captured by Muslims in Egypt 1250, Marguerite was 8 months pregnant. Negotiated with Pisan merchants to secure ships for French forces. Helped negotiate Louis's ransom. Gave birth in a hostile foreign city. Managed French positions in the Holy Land. Her courage and capability during the crisis were remarkable. She was effectively governing French forces in the east while heavily pregnant and while her husband was in enemy hands. But historical memory focuses on Louis IX's saintliness. He was canonized. Blanche of Castile's regency more dramatic politically, the Crusades' failure militarily disastrous. Marguerite's essential role in preventing complete catastrophe is often overlooked. She also bore 11 children, managed royal estates, was involved in governance during Louis's absences, outlived Louis by 25 years and remained influential. Contemporary sources occasionally mention tensions between Marguerite and Blanche, two strong-willed women competing for influence over Louis, but Marguerite's own achievements deserve recognition independent of these family dynamics. Philippa of Hainault 1310–1369, England's forgotten queen. Philippa of Hainault, Queen of England as wife of Edward III, is one of England's most overlooked queens, despite her importance. Her background, daughter of the Count of Hainault Low Countries, married Edward III in 1328, beautiful, intelligent, and politically astute. Her role bore 12 children including Edward the Black Prince and John of Gaunt. Governed England effectively as regent during Edward's absences in France's 100 Years' War. Negotiated with Parliament for taxation. Managed finances and administration. The Burghers of Calais 1347, famous story, possibly legendary or exaggerated, where Philippa pleaded for the lives of 6 citizens of Calais, whom Edward III intended to execute. Edward reportedly spared them at Philippa's intercession. Whether historically accurate, the story reflects her reputation for mercy and compassion. Cultural patronage supported scholars and artists. Patronized Froissart, the famous chronicler who dedicated his chronicles to her. Promoted chivalric culture at Edward's court. Why forgotten? Overshadowed by Edward III's military reputation and the Black Prince's fame. Her governance was competent but not dramatic. Later medieval and modern historians focused on the Hundred Years' War's military aspects. She died in 1369, reportedly from dropsy edema. Edward III was genuinely grief-stricken, unusual enough to be noteworthy. Medieval royal marriages were often loveless. Modern reassessment recognizes her as one of England's most capable queen consorts, but she remains far less famous than contemporaries like Isabella of France or later queens like Elizabeth I, Urraca of Leon and Castile 1079. 1126, the Queen Regnant who ruled alone. Urraca was Queen of Leon and Castile in her own right, one of few medieval women to rule a major kingdom independently, not as regent. Yet she's largely unknown outside Spain. Her inheritance, daughter of Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile. Her brother died, making her heir. She inherited in 1109, becoming Queen Regnant. Her reign was tumultuous. She was initially married to Alfonso II of Aragon, arranged to unite kingdoms. The marriage was disastrous. Alfonso tried to usurp her authority. They separated, leading to civil war between their factions. Urraca maintained her authority in Leon and Castile despite opposition. She ruled for 17 years, maintaining her kingdom's independence, and eventually passing them to her son Alfonso VII. Why forgotten? Medieval Iberian history is less studied than English or French. Chroniclers were often hostile, uncomfortable with female rule. Her reign's internal conflicts made it seem less successful than it was. She's overshadowed by later Spanish queens, especially Isabella of Castile. But Urraca demonstrated that women could rule kingdoms independently. She wasn't a regent for a son or ruling through a husband, but a Queen Regnant governing in her own name. Constance of Sicily 1154, 1198 Empress and Queen at 40. Constance of Sicily, Holy Roman Empress and Queen of Sicily, ruled later in life after unusual circumstances. Her background: born 1154, daughter of Roger II of Sicily. Spent much of her life in a convent, possibly not by choice, sequestered as political precaution. At age 30, married the future Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI, relatively old for a first marriage by medieval standards. Her significance: she was heir to the Kingdom of Sicily. Her marriage brought Sicily to the Holy Roman Empire. She was crowned Empress 1191 and Queen of Sicily. At age 40, she gave birth to her only child, the future Emperor Frederick II, one of medieval history's most remarkable figures. Giving birth for the first time at 40 was extraordinary and dangerous by medieval standards. After Henry VI's death 1197, Constance became regent for young Frederick. She governed Sicily effectively. She secured Frederick's succession. She negotiated with the papacy. She died in 1198, having secured her son's position. Why forgotten? Her husband and son overshadow her in historical narratives. Sicily's complex medieval history is less studied. She ruled briefly, only about a year as regent, but her role was crucial. Without her, Frederick II wouldn't have inherited Sicily, and European history would have been different. The Nameless Queens. Beyond individually forgotten queens are categories of queens. We know almost nothing about early medieval queens. The Merovingian and Carolingian periods, 5th–9th centuries, saw numerous queens. Sources are fragmentary at best. Many queens are mere names in genealogies. Their lives, personalities, and achievements are lost. Queens of smaller kingdoms. Medieval Europe had numerous small kingdoms: Scotland, Norway, various Slavic kingdoms, etc. Their queens are poorly documented. Sources are limited or lost. Modern scholarship has recovered some, but many remain obscure. Second or third wives. Kings often married multiple times, widowed or divorced. Second or subsequent wives often received less attention from chroniclers. If they didn't produce heirs who became kings, they might be nearly forgotten. Childless queens. Queens who failed to produce heirs often disappeared from narratives. Their lack of descendants meant no one had political interest in preserving their memory. They were seen as failures by medieval standards. The silence is in the record. Understanding forgotten queens requires acknowledging what we don't and can't know: private lives. We rarely know queens' personal thoughts, emotions, or opinions. Letters occasionally survive. Eleanor of Aquitaine's correspondence provides glimpses. But most queens' inner lives are mysteries. Relationships. Did queens love their husbands? We rarely know with certainty. Relationships with children, ladies-in-waiting, and confidantes are mostly obscured. Political alliances don't reveal personal feelings. Daily activities. Detailed accounts of daily life are rare. We can reconstruct typical routines but not specific queens' particular days. The texture of lived experience is largely lost. Achievements. Much of queens' work managing estates, negotiating disputes, cultural patronage wasn't recorded systematically. Successful governance that prevented crises is invisible in chronicles focused on dramatic events. Cultural influence is hard to trace definitively. The bias in sources. Medieval sources were written by men, usually clergy, with particular viewpoints. Misogyny. Many chroniclers believed women shouldn't rule or exercise power, coloring their accounts. Political partisanship. Chronicles often supported or opposed particular factions, affecting how queens were portrayed. Literary conventions. Chronicles followed conventions. Virtuous queens were beautiful and pious. Wicked queens were ugly and lustful that obscure reality. Religious bias. Clerical chroniclers judged queens by religious standards: piety, chastity, humility that may not reflect their actual priorities or achievements. Modern historians must read these sources critically, recognizing biases and reading between the lines. Recovering forgotten queens. Recent scholarship has begun recovering some forgotten queens. News sources, administrative records, financial accounts, and charters sometimes reveal queens' activities. Archaeological evidence. Buildings, tombs provides material information. Previously neglected sources are being studied. New questions. Instead of asking only about political power, historians examine cultural influence, economic management, and social networks. Women's history and gender studies bring new methodologies. Comparative approaches reveal patterns across regions and periods. Revisionist biographies. Scholars are writing new biographies of previously neglected queens. These challenge traditional dismissive narratives. They recognize complexity and capability previously overlooked. But limitations remain. Some queens will never be fully recovered. Sources simply don't exist. Our knowledge is inevitably incomplete. We must acknowledge uncertainty and avoid projecting modern assumptions onto fragmentary evidence. The forgotten queens remind us that history is selective. Fame, documentation, and memory don't necessarily correlate with capability, influence, or historical importance. Many remarkable women lived and shaped their worlds, yet left only shadows in the historical record. Medieval queenship wasn't static. It evolved over centuries in response to political, social, religious, and cultural changes. Tracing this evolution from early medieval queens through to the early modern period, roughly 516 OD CE, reveals both continuities and transformations in how royal women exercised power. Early medieval queenship, 5th–10th centuries. The early medieval period saw distinctive forms of queenship, Germanic traditions among Germanic peoples: Franks, Visigoths, Lombards. Queens had recognized roles. Queens could be regents for minor sons. Some queens wielded substantial power. Queen Brunhilde of Austrasia, 543–613, ruled for decades. But sources are fragmentary, and our knowledge is limited. The Merovingian queens, Frankish dynasty, 5th–8th centuries. Queens like Brunhilde and Fredegund wielded enormous power. They engaged in brutal conflicts, assassinations, warfare, political intrigue. Gregory of Tours chronicled their activities, providing unusual detail for the period. But the Merovingian system collapsed, replaced by Carolingians. Carolingian period, 8th–9th centuries. Carlomagnus Empire saw more structured queenship. Queens were crowned and had ceremonial roles. But Carolingian political fragmentation and Viking invasions disrupted royal authority. Queens' documented power declined somewhat, or documentation decreased. Early medieval characteristics. Queenship was less institutionalized than later periods. Personal power mattered more than formal position. Violence and instability were common. Documentation is fragmentary. The High Medieval Period 11th–13th centuries. The central medieval period saw queenship become more defined and structured. Institutionalization. Queens' roles became more formally defined. Coronation rituals standardized. Queens' households became more elaborate and structured. Legal and ceremonial positions were clarified. The examples we've explored: Eleanor of Aquitaine, Empress Matilda, Blanche of Castile, Melisende of Jerusalem came from this period, representing queenship at its most developed. Characteristics: queens could wield substantial power as regents, consorts, or regnants. Cultural and religious patronage flourished. Queens were integral to dynastic politics. Documentation improves: more chronicles, administrative records. Regional variations: English and French queenship were relatively well documented and powerful. Iberian queens sometimes ruled in their own right more readily. Italian city-states had different political structures, fewer traditional queens. Eastern Europe and Scandinavia had distinct traditions, less well documented. The late medieval period 14th–15th centuries. The later medieval period saw both continuities and new challenges: political instability, wars, Hundred Years' War, Wars of the Roses. Others created opportunities and dangers. Queens like Margaret of Anjou became military leaders. Civil wars put queens at risk. Executions, depositions became more common. Cultural flourishing: despite political turmoil, cultural patronage continued. Courtly culture became more elaborate. Some queens like Philippa of Hainault maintained sophisticated courts. Increased vulnerability as royal power centralized. Threats to queens increased. False accusations became political weapons. The machinery of state could be turned against queens more effectively. Proto-feminist thought. Writers like Christine de Pizan defended women's capabilities. Literary traditions: courtly love, romances created cultural space for discussing women's roles. But practical political gains were limited. The transition to early modern 15th–16th centuries. The late 15th and early 16th centuries saw transition toward early modern queenship. Isabella of Castile, as we explored, represented a turning point. She ruled as Queen Regnant with extraordinary power. She and Ferdinand created a unified, centralized state. She engaged in proto-imperial expansion Americas. She represented both medieval traditions and early modern state building. The Renaissance influence: humanist education produced more learned queens. Catherine of Aragon, Isabella's daughter, was one of England's most educated women. Queens increasingly participated in intellectual and artistic culture, but Renaissance humanism was ambivalent about women admiring classical examples while maintaining patriarchal norms. Religious Reformation. The Protestant Reformation beginning 1517 would fundamentally change European politics. Queens became central to religious conflicts. Mary Tudor and Elizabeth I in England, Catherine de Medici in France. Queens navigated religious warfare. Religious identity became inseparable from political loyalty. Dynastic politics: marriage alliances became even more crucial as states centralized. Queens were pawns in increasingly complex international diplomacy. But some queens like Catherine de Medici manipulated this system effectively. From medieval to modern queenship, several key changes marked the transition. Increased formality versus decreased practical power. Paradoxically, queens' ceremonial roles became more elaborate. But in some regions, queens' practical governing authority declined. As bureaucracies professionalized, queens were sometimes marginalized. Though exceptions existed, Elizabeth I being the most obvious. The emergence of Queen Regnants, Mary I and Elizabeth I in England. Mary, Queen of Scots in Scotland. Various other female monarchs across Europe. The 16th–17th centuries saw more women ruling in their own right than earlier periods. This required legal and ideological justifications, debates about women's capacity to rule. Print culture's impact. The printing press mid-15th century onward changed how royal images were created and distributed. Queens could be praised or vilified more widely. Public opinion became more important, but this also meant hostile propaganda could spread more easily. The persistence of medieval patterns. Despite changes, many medieval patterns persisted. Queens still primarily derived legitimacy from relationships with men. Childbearing remained crucial. Religious devotion and charity were expected. Cultural patronage continued to be important. Lessons from the evolution. Tracing queenship's evolution reveals several patterns. Adaptability. Queenship adapted to changing political circumstances. Women found ways to exercise power within evolving systems. Continuity. Despite changes, core elements persisted. Childbearing. Patronage, informal influence, vulnerability to accusations. Individual agency. Throughout the medieval and early modern periods, individual queens with capability and determination could transcend limitations. Eleanor, Blanche, Isabella, Elizabeth I, and others demonstrated that personality and skill mattered. Structural constraints. But individual agency operated within structures that fundamentally limited women's authority. Even the most powerful queens faced gendered constraints. Historical contingency. Whether queens could exercise power depended on circumstances. Weak kings, minority sons, civil wars, etc., as much as ability. The evolution of queenship wasn't linear progress toward gender equality. Medieval queens sometimes had more practical power than early modern queens in some contexts, but rather adaptation to changing political, social, and cultural circumstances. Having journeyed through centuries of medieval queenship, from Eleanor of Aquitaine to Isabella of Castile, from battlefield commanders to cultural patrons, from empresses to forgotten figures, we can now reflect on what these women's lives teach us about gender, power, historical change, and human capability. Lesson 1. Structural constraints and individual agency. Medieval queens' experiences reveal the tension between structural limitations and individual agency. The constraints were real: legal subordination to husbands, exclusion from most formal political positions, the succession imperative producing heirs, vulnerability to accusations, societal expectations of feminine behavior. Yet individual women transcended constraints. Eleanor of Aquitaine influenced 2 kingdoms for 8 decades. Blanche of Castile governed France effectively. Isabella of Castile ruled in her own right. Melisende of Jerusalem fought for her authority. The lessons: structures matter enormously, but they don't entirely determine outcomes. Capable, determined individuals can push against limitations, create opportunities, and occasionally achieve extraordinary things, while acknowledging that success required both ability and favorable circumstances. Weak kings, minority sons, civil wars, etc. Modern relevance. Understanding this balance between structure and agency helps us think about contemporary gender inequality, recognizing both systemic barriers and individual achievement without reducing everything to either structures or personal choice. Lesson 2. Power takes many forms. Medieval queens exercised power through diverse means: formal authority, regency, Blanche of Castile, others ruling in their own right, Melisende, Araka, Isabella of Castile, recognized ceremonial and administrative roles. Informal influence, counsel to kings, Eleanor of Aquitaine, managing networks of supporters. Patronage, creating obligations. Intercession, asking mercy for petitioners. Cultural power, patronage of arts, architecture, and literature, shaping courtly culture. Religious foundations and charity. Economic power, managing dower lands and estates. Financial administration, control of resources. The lesson: power isn't only formal political authority, it includes influence, cultural shaping, economic control, and moral authority. Focusing only on formal positions obscures much of how power actually operates. Modern relevance. Understanding diverse forms of power helps us recognize women's historical contributions beyond narrow political definitions and appreciate how power functions in complex social systems. Lesson 3. The personal is political and vice versa. Medieval queens' lives blur boundaries between personal and political. Marriages were political alliances. Eleanor's marriages to Louis VII and Henry the Vauzeux reshaped European politics. Isabella's marriage to Ferdinand united Spain. Royal marriages were treaties, not romances. Childbearing was political duty. Producing heirs was queen's most critical role. Failure could lead to divorce, political vulnerability. Success brought power and security. Personal relationships had political consequences. Edward's relationships with led to Isabella of France's rebellion. Margaret of Anjou's relationship with her son drove her decades of warfare. Queens' relationships with ladies-in-waiting, advisors, and clergy shaped politics. The lesson: the division between personal life and political life is artificial, especially for people in power, but really for everyone. Personal relationships, family structures, and intimate decisions have political dimensions. Modern relevance: contemporary debates about work-life balance, reproductive rights, and private versus public life echo medieval realities. The personal has always been political. Lesson 4: capability and morality are distinct. Medieval queens demonstrate that capability doesn't guarantee moral virtue, capable, but morally questionable. Isabella of France overthrew her husband but was complicit in his murder. Isabella of Castile governed effectively, but established the Inquisition and expelled Jews. Irene of Athens restored icons but murdered her son. Virtuous but ineffective, some pious, gentle queens accomplished little politically. Good character didn't guarantee good governance. The complexity: Eleanor of Aquitaine was capable but rebelled against her husband. Blanche of Castile governed well but crushed opposition ruthlessly. Margaret of Anjou showed courage but also cruelty. The lesson: we must evaluate capability and morality separately. Capable leaders can commit atrocities, good people can be poor rulers. Historical figures are complex, neither heroes nor villains but humans with mixed motivations and consequences. Modern relevance: contemporary politics requires distinguishing between effective governance and ethical behavior. Both matter, but they're not the same thing. Lesson 5: context shapes possibilities. Medieval queens' opportunities depended heavily on context. Political circumstances: weak or absent kings created opportunities for queens. Civil wars forced women into leadership. Stable, strong kings left less room for queens' independent authority. Cultural context: Crusader states accepted female rule more readily. Desperation for effective leadership. Byzantine traditions included powerful empresses. Western European feudalism had specific gender norms. Individual circumstances: inheritance: queens, who were heirs in their own right, had more power. Marriage: whether husbands shared power or monopolized it. Children: mothers of heirs had leverage. Personality: assertive queens achieved more than passive ones. The lesson: historical change isn't just about individual heroes, but about contexts that enable or constrain action. Understanding history requires examining both remarkable individuals and the circumstances that made their achievements possible or impossible. Modern relevance: social change requires both individual action and structural/cultural shifts that create opportunities for that action to succeed. Lesson 6: historical memory is constructed and contested. How medieval queens are remembered reveals as much about later eras as about the queens themselves. Changing reputations: Eleanor of Aquitaine was vilified by some medieval chroniclers, romanticized by later writers, and reassessed by modern historians. Isabella of France was demonized as the she-wolf, but modern historians see a more complex figure. Forgotten queens are being recovered by contemporary scholarship. The sources matter: medieval chronicles reflected authors' biases, often hostile to powerful women. Later literature: Shakespeare's plays, Victorian novels shaped popular understanding. Modern historians bring new questions and methodologies. Competing narratives: national histories create heroes and villains. Gender politics shape how queens are portrayed. Religious perspectives influence evaluation. The lesson: history isn't simply what happened, but how we interpret, remember, and narrate the past. Historical understanding changes as new evidence emerges, new questions are asked, and cultural contexts shift. Modern relevance: contemporary debates about historical monuments, curriculum content, and whose stories matter reflect ongoing contestation over historical memory. Lesson 7: gender norms are historical and changeable. Medieval queens' experiences show that gender roles vary historically and culturally. Medieval norms differed from modern ones. Medieval people had different assumptions about gender, but within medieval period, norms varied by region and changed over time. Individual queens pushed against and sometimes changed norms. The variations: Byzantine empresses had different possibilities than Western queens. Iberian queens sometimes ruled in their own right more readily. Crusader states had different gender politics. Each kingdom had distinct traditions. The changes early medieval queens had different roles than high medieval queens. Queenship evolved over centuries. Some periods saw regression, others progress, not linear development. The lesson: gender roles aren't natural or timeless, but are historical constructs that vary across time and place. Understanding this historicity reveals that current gender norms are also changeable. They're products of specific historical developments, not eternal truths. Modern relevance: contemporary gender debates benefit from historical perspective, showing that traditional gender roles have actually varied enormously across time and cultures. Lesson 8: power corrupts, but powerlessness also harms. Medieval queens demonstrate both the dangers of power and the harm of powerlessness. The dangers of power: powerful queens sometimes committed atrocities. Power enabled cruelty, inquisition, murders, warfare. Absolute power was dangerous regardless of gender, but powerlessness was also harmful. Powerless queens could be divorced, imprisoned, executed. Queens without power couldn't protect themselves or others. Vulnerability to abuse increased without authority. The balance: queens needed power to be safe and effective. But unchecked power was dangerous. Accountability and limits mattered. The lesson: simple narratives about power that it's only corrupting, or that it's only protective, miss complexity. Power enables both good and evil. Powerlessness creates vulnerability but not virtue. The goal should be accountable, limited power distributed justly, not the absence of power. Modern relevance: contemporary discussions about empowerment must grapple with power's complexity, recognizing both its necessity and its dangers. The collective legacy: what did medieval queens collectively achieve? Governance: they governed effectively as regents and rulers, demonstrating women's capability in statecraft. Culture: their patronage created much of medieval civilization's cultural achievement: buildings, manuscripts, literature, art. Diplomacy: they negotiated treaties, managed alliances, and conducted international relations. Social welfare: through charity and institutional foundations, they provided healthcare, education, and social services. Precedent: each queen who ruled successfully made future female rule more conceivable. Representation: they demonstrated women's full humanity, intelligence, courage, capability, and complexity. But also they participated in systems of oppression: feudalism, religious persecution, warfare. Their privilege came from aristocratic position, not universal women's advancement. Most benefits of their rule went to elites, not common people. They weren't proto-feminists consciously fighting patriarchy, but women navigating medieval systems. The final reflection: medieval queens were neither oppressed victims without agency, nor modern feminists born in the wrong era. They were women operating within specific historical contexts, constrained by gender, class, and medieval assumptions, yet finding ways to exercise power, influence events, and shape history. Some were capable and ethical, some capable but cruel, some virtuous but politically ineffective, some simply ordinary people in extraordinary positions. They loved and hated, succeeded and failed, acted nobly and shamefully. They were, in short, fully human. Their lives teach us that gender inequality is structural and deep-rooted. Medieval constraints persisted across centuries. Individual women have always found ways to exercise agency within constraints. Power is complex, taking many forms beyond formal political authority. Historical change is possible but difficult, requiring both structural shifts and individual action. Historical memory is constructed. We must actively recover women's history. Gender norms are historical and changeable, not natural or eternal. Capability and morality are distinct. We must evaluate both. Simple heroes and villains, narratives, obscure realities, complexity. These lessons remain relevant not because medieval and modern societies are the same, they're profoundly different, but because understanding how gender, power, and agency interacted in past societies illuminates present dynamics and future possibilities. And so we come to the end of our journey through the world of medieval queens, from Eleanor of Aquitaine's 8 decades of power to forgotten queens whose names barely survive in records, from battlefield commanders to cultural patrons, from empresses to rebels, from saints to sinners. What have we learned? We have learned that medieval queenship was infinitely more complex than simplified narratives suggest. Queens were not uniformly powerless decorations nor proto-feminist rebels. They were women navigating specific historical circumstances, operating within severe constraints yet sometimes achieving extraordinary things. We have learned that some medieval queens wielded real power as regents governing kingdoms, as consorts advising kings, as rulers in their own right, as cultural patrons shaping civilization. Eleanor of Aquitaine influenced European politics for decades. Blanche of Castile saved France from disintegration. Isabella of Castile unified Spain and inadvertently initiated European colonization of the Americas. These were not minor figures but major historical actors whose decisions shaped events. We have learned that power came at a price. Queens who exercised authority faced accusations, rebellion, and sometimes death. Isabella of France deposed her husband, but was eventually overthrown herself. Margaret of Anjou fought for decades and lost everything. Even successful queens like Eleanor spent years imprisoned. Power was dangerous for men too, but gender added extra layers of vulnerability and constraint. We have learned that queens exercised power through diverse means not just formal political authority, but cultural patronage, economic management, diplomatic networks, religious devotion, and moral authority. Their manuscripts, buildings, and institutions often outlasted their political achievements. The Melisende Psalter survives centuries after the Kingdom of Jerusalem fell. Fontevraud Abbey stands as Eleanor's monument. The Royal Chapel in Granada preserves Isabella's memory. We have learned that medieval queens were fully human, capable of intelligence and stupidity, courage and cowardice, compassion and cruelty, virtue and vice. They made brilliant decisions and terrible mistakes. They loved and hated, schemed and prayed, succeeded and failed. They were neither saints nor monsters but complex human beings whose lives reveal the possibilities and limitations of their era. The paradox of medieval queenship. Medieval queenship embodied a fundamental paradox. Queens were both powerful and powerless, honored and vulnerable, central to politics and excluded from formal authority, capable of achieving extraordinary things and constrained by gender norms, remembered and forgotten. This paradox reflects the complexity of gender and power. Throughout history, formal structures matter, but so does individual agency. Legal restrictions are real, but so are practical ways around them. Official ideology says one thing, but reality often contradicts it. Understanding this paradox helps us avoid simplistic narratives about either universal oppression or unproblematic achievement. Medieval queens' lives were textured, complicated, and often contradictory, like real life always is. The women behind the crowns. Throughout this journey, we've tried to see medieval queens as women, not just political figures or cultural icons, but human beings with thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears, and the full complexity of human experience. Eleanor of Aquitaine wasn't just a powerful political actor, but a woman who loved and was betrayed, who fought for her children, who endured 16 years of imprisonment, who survived into her 80s maintaining political involvement despite age that would have sidelined most people. Blanche of Castile wasn't just an effective regent, but a widow thrust into governance, a mother raising a saint, a woman navigating male-dominated politics through intelligence and determination. Margaret of Anjou wasn't just a warrior queen, but a mother fighting desperately for her son's inheritance, a foreigner in a hostile land, a woman who lost everything despite decades of effort. Isabella of Castile wasn't just a powerful monarch, but a woman who fought a civil war for her throne, who balanced ambition with piety, whose achievements included both state building and persecution. Behind every crown was a woman eating meals, bearing children, experiencing joy and sorrow, loving and hating, dreaming and fearing, living a life that was unique yet also shaped by her historical moment. The silence and the recovery. We must acknowledge what we don't know. Despite our journey through queens' lives, much remains silent. We rarely know their private thoughts and feelings, their personal relationships, intimate details, their daily experiences, texture, their own perspectives on their lives. The sources were written by others, usually men, usually clergy with their own biases, agendas, and limitations. We see queens through these filters, reconstructing as best we can but always aware of gaps and uncertainties. Recent scholarship has recovered some forgotten queens and reinterpreted others, but much remains unknown and unknowable. History is inevitably incomplete, a collection of surviving fragments, not a complete picture. Yet the recovery matters. Every queen whose story is told, every achievement recognized, every complexity acknowledged enriches our understanding of the past and challenges simplistic narratives about gender, power, and history. The modern relevance. Why do medieval queens matter today? Not because they were just like us, they weren't. Medieval society was profoundly different from modern societies. Not because they were proto-feminists, they weren't. They operated within and generally accepted medieval assumptions, even as they pushed against specific constraints. But because their lives illuminate enduring themes, how people exercise agency within constraining structures, how power operates through formal and informal channels, how gender shapes possibilities and limitations, how individual capability matters but so does context, how historical change happens slowly, unevenly, through complex interactions of structure and agency, how historical memory is constructed and can be reconstructed. Studying medieval queens helps us understand that gender inequality is structural and deep-rooted, persisting across centuries and societies, but not natural or eternal, varying by time, place, and constantly contested. It shows us that remarkable individuals can achieve extraordinary things, but that systemic change requires more than individual achievement. It demonstrates that history is more complex than simple narratives of progress or decline. The legacy. What is medieval queens' ultimate legacy? Politically, they demonstrated that women could govern effectively as regents, consorts, and rulers in their own right. Each successful queen made future female rule more conceivable. The line from Eleanor of Aquitaine and Blanche of Castile leads eventually to Elizabeth I, Catherine the Great, and modern female heads of state. Culturally, their patronage shaped medieval civilization. The manuscripts they commissioned, buildings they constructed, and institutions they founded enriched medieval life and preserved cultural achievements. Socially, they provided models sometimes admirable, sometimes cautionary of how women could navigate male-dominated worlds. They showed possibilities and limitations, achievements and costs. Historically, they prove that women have always been part of history, not just supporting characters or victims, but actors, decision-makers, and shapers of events. Recovering their stories challenges historical narratives that marginalize women and enriches our understanding of the past. The continuing fascination. Medieval queens continue to fascinate through academic scholarship, popular histories, novels. Television shows. The appeal of shows like Game of Thrones partly comes from echoing medieval politics and powerful women, and cultural memory. This fascination reflects several things: the dramatic nature of their lives, intrigue, betrayal, warfare, romance. The appeal of powerful women in history offering models and inspiration. The complexity of their stories, neither pure heroes nor villains. The enduring relevance of themes: power, gender, family, ambition, survival. But fascination can also distort, romanticizing, simplifying, or projecting modern concerns onto medieval figures. We must balance appreciation with critical understanding, engagement with accuracy, inspiration with historical honesty. The final word. As you drift towards sleep, carrying with you images from our long journey: Eleanor reading letters by candlelight in her comfortable prison, Blanche leading armies across France, Melisende governing Jerusalem from the Crusader court, Isabella watching Columbus's ships disappear over the horizon, Margaret fleeing yet another battlefield, and countless other queens, known and forgotten, who wore crowns and navigated the treacherous waters of medieval politics. Reflect on this: medieval queens lived in a world that officially denied women authority, yet pragmatically recognized that capability transcends gender. They wore crowns, but those crowns were both symbols of power and targets for attack. They shaped history, but often through indirect means. They achieved extraordinary things, but within severe constraints. They were fully human, neither victims nor heroines, but complex individuals navigating difficult circumstances with varying degrees of success. Their lives teach us that history is complex, that human capability is remarkable, that structures constrain but don't entirely determine outcomes. That change is possible but difficult, and that understanding the past enriches our engagement with the present. The medieval world has passed. Its queens are long dead, their kingdoms transformed or vanished, their crowns in museums or lost to time. But their stories survive, illuminating an era when women, despite being told they shouldn't and couldn't, ruled kingdoms, commanded armies, built cathedrals, sponsored literature, and shaped civilization. Sleep peacefully, knowing that throughout history, remarkable women have found ways to exercise power, influence events, and leave legacies despite and sometimes because of obstacles they faced. The Queen's chambers are empty now, the castles are ruins or tourist sites, the crowns are behind glass, but the memory of women who wore those crowns and navigated medieval politics with intelligence, courage, and determination continues to inspire, instruct, and remind us that human beings, female and male, have always been more capable and complex than narrow social categories suggest. Tomorrow, you may visit museums and see medieval crowns, walk through castle ruins where queens once held court, read chronicles that mention their deeds, and perhaps think differently about medieval history, gender, and power. The queens are gone, but their legacies remain in buildings they commissioned, institutions they founded, literature they patronized, and in the very fact that their stories survive to challenge assumptions and enrich understanding.